All right. Evening, everyone. Let me call this meeting to order. Why don't we rise for a pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. All right. Let me do a roll call. Councilmember Glada.
Here.
Councilmember Krasikov.
Here.
Councilmember Wake.
Here.
Mayor Kiriakou is here. Councilmember Grant.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
And Councilmember Gorton.
Present.
All right. I see the acting city administrator, and I see an attorney online. Is that you, Nick?
It is. Good evening, Mayor and council members.
And then Jennifer Gray with Keenan Bean is also here. She is ordinarily the planning board attorney, and she's going to talk to us about comprehensive plan. Okay, so that's the pledge. Let's do public comment first, which allows people to speak sooner rather than later. So if anyone would like to speak on any topic, there are no public hearings tonight. You can do so now. I'll read off the list. First one is Thomas Wright. Come on up.
Thank you and good evening. Thomas Wright, 24 Grove Street, Chair of the Beacon Greenway Committee. I was completely surprised by the news about the creation of a Trails Committee and the termination of the Greenway Committee. More concerning to me, however, is the degree to which the City Council may have been surprised by this announcement. I'd like to share with you a few questions that form the basis of this concern. For starters, if the stated goal of the new committee was to broaden its scope, why not simply broaden the scope of the current committee? In a related question, wouldn't it be better to build off the existing Greenway Committee given the institutional knowledge represented by the existing members? Keep in mind that our successful efforts for planning and implementing trails at Beacon have origins going back almost 2 decades, and that myself and former Chair Jim Korn founded the advocacy group that became the current ad hoc committee under former Mayor Casal. As a side note, the existing Greenway Committee members recognize that many in the community are unaware of what the committee has achieved, and we intend to remedy that by creating and issuing a summary document to share with the City Council and the community. Lastly, if the goal was to change the membership or the leadership, why not simply ask members to resign or refuse to reinstate them? Aside from specific questions about goals and intent, was an open and inclusive process followed that will most likely achieve the best possible result for the community? Or the voices of the council, and by extension the voices of the community, sidelined and ignored in this process? These questions go beyond a matter of good governance. They relate to the role of volunteers in this community and the committees on which they serve. For this service to have any value, volunteers need to be confident that there is a mutually supportive and transparent relationship between the committees, the mayor, and the city council. It is difficult for me to not come to the conclusion that the Greenway Committee was terminated because of our efforts to get the city to honor its commitments. For years, I've been absolutely blown away by how much time and passion volunteers put into this community and how much value they bring to Beacon in the process. This value should never be taken for granted. Thank you for your dedication and service to Beacon.
Thank you. That's the only one signed up, so if someone in the public would like to speak, come up.
Good evening, Teresa Kraft, a concerned resident of this beautiful city. Well, here we go again. The residents of Beacon are watching tonight, anxious to see the direction of the discussions in this double-header meeting. Will you increase the number of meetings back to the regular schedule? We all know that your current plan of having 2 monthly meetings, back-to-back workshops, and a voting meeting on the same night, which typically lasts for 1 hour, is inadequate for various reasons. For years, I have questioned the approach of conducting a project review and a vote during the same meeting. The city's lawyer objected, insisting that I was incorrect and that is not how things were done. However, this is precisely how things have been done. We have been experienced precisely what we have been experiencing for the past 5 months. Cryptic 5-minute discussions followed by rush votes. You're right, many residents have lost track of what's happening, and it seems that many council members are also unaware of what is in those packets. Throwing the Trail Committee under the bus is typical of this administration. Use and refuse. The Route 52 corridor did not get to present their final report, and the Main Street Access Committee's recommendations mostly have gone unimplemented. We recently witnessed our current, previous, and on-leave administrators exit abruptly amongst chaos. Now we're facing multiple lawsuits, sewer and water issues, poor employee retention, projects going over budget, and significant problems coming to light. I can't wait for the public to uncover the real dirt. Who was involved in the backdoor deals that led to the sale of the 2 firehouses that belonged to the public before it was made known to everyone? Receiving an agenda packet just 2 days before the meeting is insufficient time to review all the materials thoroughly. One attachment alone contained 250 pages. Well, I'm well-versed in the 2017 Comprehensive Plan and have done my research on the inner workings of this city on all levels. And some council members haven't even been here or lived here in 2017, or let alone, they're not even aware of the 27 version. I believe the shit show is more entertaining than television. Good night.
Thank you. Anyone else in the physical public? Anyone online?
If you're on Zoom and you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand option at the bottom of your screen. If you're joining us by the YouTube live stream, you will need to navigate to the city website calendar where there's a Zoom link, and then you can join the Zoom and raise your hand at that point. As of now, we have one hand raised, and that is Johanna. Johanna, you have permission to speak whenever you're ready.
Hi, good evening. I just wanted to speak on a couple of things that I think you might be discussing this evening. Firstly, echoing the previous speaker on the frequency of council meetings now. I have to admit I'm not the biggest fan either for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I listen to a lot of stuff that you have to say, but I don't listen live. I listen later in the week. I like having the workshops. I liked having the workshops as a separate meeting because it gave me much more of a sense of your upcoming workflow and voting patterns. It gave me time to digest and reflect on things. It meant that I could come to comment if I wanted before the vote. It meant that I could come to speak to somebody before the vote, or I could talk to others who wanted to raise an issue. And I don't really have that opportunity now. I know you have that second comment period, but to my knowledge, nobody is using that. Nobody's sticking around for that. In fact, I think it's only been used once when the person, there was Yvonne, who missed the first public comment. So I fear that that's getting less democratic rather than more. And the second fear I have is just the amount of work and discussion is being reduced. Case in point, last meeting, I felt that things were getting very rushed towards the end because it was getting late. And I think if you're going to have only 2 meetings per month, that has to be a consequence of that it's going to run later. I would really worry if actually you're all getting out of the meetings at 9 o'clock every time, because you're doing half the amount of work or half the amount of meetings. So those are my concerns. I obviously appreciate how much time you put and thought you put into all of the work you do for City, but I do have concerns about moving to this structure. Second quick thing, I've been hearing, I guess, a lot of things about pedestrian safety that are being referred to the Traffic Safety Committee, things about crossings, things about stop signs, and I just wanted to point out that those can be part of a master plan along with bikes. And in fact, they usually are. There are holistic walk-bike plans. And I don't want to denigrate the work that the Traffic Safety Committee does, but often that's very tactical and reactive. And I think the reason that we're doing that is because we don't have anything bigger. We don't have a more strategic blueprint. And so I would love to see that better integrated. I would love to see more transparency and accountability in terms of the streetscape discussions we have, in terms of county execs or the engineer, or in fact the new trail committee. I know that's been raised tonight. I fear that we're then moving discussion about trails into a committee rather than into a bigger plan for what we want to do with mobility, transportation,
15 seconds.
Congestion mitigation, and safety. So those are the 2 things I wanted to speak on. Thank you for your time. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
There's no other speakers on Zoom right now.
Okay, all right, so let's start up on workshop. So I will permit it as long as the council doesn't mind.
Sure.
Just by all means, come on up.
Just real quick. Hi there, I'm Jessica Eriksmoen from 98 Neville's Avenue. I know we don't have to say where we live, but I love my neighborhood. I'm really proud of our area. I'm one of your ward members. I just want to say something that a few people after I spoke last time had watched the video, and they said, you said something about not feeling represented here, like that we aren't represented here. And they said that really resonated with me. And I just want to pose that question to you guys, like, why do some people feel that way? Why do I feel that way? I really don't know the answer, quite honestly. But I do really appreciate each and every one of you. You're coming out, you're showing up, and I love seeing you here. Whether we agree on our policy or not, that doesn't really matter. We're here and we're being a part of our government. And I want to invite other people to feel a part of what we're doing here. And just like I know your name is Ben, but I wonder where Chris is. It's like, I know he was here, his name's on here, but where'd he go? I know he lives in New Paltz or someplace, but, and I know this isn't an elected seat, the city administrator, but I'd like to know, like, what happened? Wonderful things are happening. I don't know if you know about the Savage Wonder. It's the vet rep down at the end of Main Street. They are in the old 1920s bank. They have been here a year. We're going to be doing a reading there on this Sunday. They're having a year-long, on the 15th of May, they're doing a big celebration of their year-long thing, but it's about having veterans work done, families of first responders, that kind of thing. And I'd love to see our city council there to support our veterans. I love this on here where the disabled veterans have property tax exemption. I think that's from the state. But I love your stand. I love you being here. Thank you. And thanks for letting me pop back up. I appreciate it.
Of course. Okay, are we ready to switch over to workshop items?
I'm going to invite our city planner to take my spot, and I'll hop back, but I have a microphone, so we'll still be able to chime in on questions and things like that.
Very good. Come on up, Natalie. Thank you for coming down.
Good evening.
So are you going to pick up the HDLO discussion and I'm going to add to it, or the other way around?
Either way, I mean, I think we wanted to start with the
Why don't you
outreach
start?
that had been happening. Yeah, I mean, I think there's no action items on the agenda for tonight for the HCLO nominations. I think we just kind of wanted to, there's been some outreach to property owners over the past few days by the mayor, past weeks. So I think we want to update the council on that. And then I just did want to reiterate that I think Nick and I did hear the request for an FAQ sheet to kind of clarify some of the points within the regulations. So working on that for future meetings. And then also we've been looking into the benefit side of this, like what is the benefit to the property owners in terms of there's language already in the code about assessment abatements and property tax abatements, so we can talk about that. But if Mayor, you want to start with your outreach first, I think we can start there.
Thank you. So if you all look on page 3 of the packet, there's a map there, and it includes the 17, I guess it ended up being 16 from this list, and then added the Elks Club, right?
Correct.
So almost the map of what we're dealing with. Just remember the Elks is on the list. And I reached out to a number of them. One of them, the house that's labeled 14, was here and would like to be included in it. There were several people who came and spoke at council with a range of concerns either not sure, wanting to learn more, having a first answer of no without learning more. So I reached out to a number of folks. I spoke to 3 of them last weekend, or the weekend before, sorry. They were the owner of a Church Street home on the corner of Church and North Elm, the owner of an Elm Street home on North Elm. So numbers 3 and 5 on your map. And then also number 11, which is St. Rocco's, right? 2 of those people had sent emails, which we forwarded. One of them appeared on here as well. So the interesting thing, and I hadn't really realized it, of course, if you look at this map, it's very clear. Half of the homes on our proposed list are in the T-zone. So they're in the, now what we've created is a transition zone. That transition zone has additional uses. The primary benefit that we put in the HDLO was additional uses with a special permit. It's not a benefit for those homes. All three of the property owners said, "What's in it for me?" And I didn't have a clean answer for that. So I thought one of our bits of input is we may want to consider a different benefit for those that don't have a benefit of additional uses. The same was the case for Main Street. The Main Street properties we put on 4, 5, 6 years ago also have the same issue of they've already got these uses, right? So we may want to think about that. That was one piece. The second piece, and you heard this from Natalie, is I did a lot of explaining. Some were very capable of reading, how the statute work, others less so. But a set of frequently asked questions would be extremely helpful. That if we send that out with someone, I think some of the reactions that we heard would be a lot more like, "Oh, I get what this is about. You're telling me that air conditioners are only for new construction. You're telling me that I don't have to do any upkeep. This is only for changes," those sorts of things. Tell me the benefits, tell me the requirements. I had the opportunity to tell folks that our home has been in the HDLO for 30 plus years since the day we arrived, and we've done, I don't know how many projects we've done on our house, including multiple projects on our porch, which faces 9D. And we've never had to go and get a certificate of appropriateness simply because we didn't take down the porch, we didn't dramatically change the porch, but we did a ton of upgrades and upkeep and replacements and things like that. So that was the input I heard. Those struck me as pretty reasonable, and while we may want to slow down some of these, we may want to proceed with others. I wasn't sure how to proceed, but I want to make sure you hear that. Natalie heard that as well, as did Jennifer and Nick, and they all might have some suggestions as well. So.
And then, so on that same thread of benefits to the property owners who have their homes included, right? So there is in the code in section 199-10, there is an exemption for historic properties, so you get a real property tax exemption for years 1 through 10 after certain improvements for being included. So that's a very important benefit. There's also within the HDL section of code, there's a section on assessment abatement as well. So as you heard at the last meeting, assessments and taxes aren't necessarily the same thing. They're not equal, but there's 2 options for those within the code. And they are specifically targeted towards the single-family homes, the existing single-family homes that are being maintained as that way, as opposed to the ones that are becoming mixed-use hotels or multifamily properties. So I think one thing we're talking about in the FAQs is really spelling out those benefits. Nick, we did reach out to the assessor, and not many properties have taken advantage of those, right? So there is benefits existing. And I think the one other thing that we talked about, and I know this won't necessarily appeal to the property owners, but we're not just talking about a benefit to individual property owners here, right? We're talking about a benefit to the history and the full community, and I know that gets borne by these individual property owners, right? But many of the other communities that I work in see these historic regulations. They're not necessarily looking at them specifically through the point of the property owners and what benefit it is to them, but rather maintaining these resources and this history for community and for generations to come. So I think a combination of the things that the mayor and I have discussed in terms of clarifying the regulations, what's excluded, confirming what the benefits are and better advertising those to folks within the HDLO, and then really trying to give maybe some of the background on the economic benefit to a community by retaining these types of historical assets in your community.
I think that all sounds like really good next steps. We do have another public hearing on this at our next meeting on the 18th. I have a question and then a thought I'd like to share with the council. So the question is, will like FAQs and that kind of benefit synopsis be available prior to that meeting? Okay, great. And then my thought for the council is that, you know, I don't think any of us necessarily want to see this be an albatross that we have to spend 6 to 8 months on. And so what might be a good way to approach this after the next public meeting is that if there are like, you know, yes, like the person who said, yes, I want to be part of this, I would be very proud to be, or no objections, you know, maybe we move those forward, shelve objections for the time being. And then if there is a need to open up the legislation and review the benefits specifically for places like T or Maine where they already have additional properties, that may be something that we look at tackling a little bit later on. And with that later on, I would also put a plug in for taking a look at Teller Avenue and a couple of other places that have kind of a dedicated mass of what appear to be well-maintained historic properties and pull those in for a future effort. Mm-hmm. So those are my thoughts for the council.
Okay. Yeah, one of the things that I got out of this, I was imagining asking a small committee, an ad hoc committee, to look at additional properties, and I've spoken to the Historical Society and also the gentleman who came in and was supportive of having his home included, who lives across the street. And I think if we do that as an ad hoc committee, I might include in their tasks reaching out initially to homeowners to explain things and to make sure they're kind of on board, and that might make our process easier. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things I'm hearing as we move forward. I like the idea of splitting out. How about the ones that have said yes or at least no objection? We can certainly move forward with those. And then I want to hear other comments, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, I like the idea of moving forward with what we can. They're easy ones. I think also I wish I had had more foresight to realize that when people first got their letters, I think something that we could have done better would be reviewing that and maybe running it by somebody who was looking at it fresh and saying, I don't plan on ever operating a business out of it. Like, I don't see what the benefit is to me. My worry is termites and, water damage. I'm just trying to upkeep this very expensive historic home. And that person very might really believe in the upkeep of a historic home, and that's probably would draw somebody to buying that place in the first place. But I think we made a misstep by not putting forward all of the benefits that you just mentioned, especially the tax benefits and just more mention of how it wouldn't be such a burden to have a historic home, and then follow up if they still object. Mm-hmm.
Well, I would ask as we distribute the FAQs that we distribute that to everybody, not just the people who've already said no, but also the people who've offered support. I'd like everybody to be able to offer an informed decision on whether their property should be included, including revisiting a prior yes with additional information if they choose to do so.
Yep.
I heard similar concerns about the benefits when people saying that I don't want to do Airbnb or bed and breakfast or an office. Like, I'm not planning major renovations. Tax abatement not necessarily, will come to play to me in a foreseeable future. One of the concerns I heard personally, but also was expressed here, is uncertainty about potential sales price of the house. Will it decrease the sale price of the house if it's nominated, or will it potentially increase the selling price? So I think there was some hesitation of people not knowing what they are agreeing to. We might have some economic data on existing houses in HDLO and how they compare to similar square footage houses and whether they sell for less, for more. And I do agree with Amber about splitting and doing what we can and clearing the docket, so to speak.
Yeah, I will tell you one thing I heard in the discussion. I raised, again, using our example as a way of, providing some comfort that you're not going to go in front of the planning board every week to, paint your windowsills. The comment was that the clump of homes where I live, which is on 9D and includes the church and 10 other homes, including the one that's next door that's been a childcare center that's shifting to a hotel, which are special uses that are permitted under the HDLO, which has allowed them to do that. That particular property also has a second home done in historic style, which also was permitted under the HDLO. So they've had a lot of benefits. But homes that aren't on 9D probably don't have the opportunity or the interest in doing some of those special uses. The other one was, I said our homes on that street are probably more valuable because each of them is in the HDLO. Comment back was, well, in our neighborhood, we're one of the few homes that would be in the HDLO, so it might provide a benefit to other homes to have us nearby, but not necessarily to us if we're the only one or two in the area. That was a really fair remark. So I just wanted to relay that you learn it every time you do this, and every time we've learned it, we've learned more, and we've learned how to adapt the ordinance a little bit. I love the FAQs. I think they're a really important part of this. So.
Yeah, I would be curious to know, is that an anecdotal assumption that the property value of the neighborhood would go up, or is there any data to back that up? That would be a great thing to include in the FAQ. And I also wanted to ask you, Natalie, I know that we were fielding questions 2 weeks ago from property owners wanting to understand the benefit to them, but could you sort of taking a few steps back and bird's eye view on this, what is the benefit to the public?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an aesthetic and a historical benefit to the public, right? I think, especially in the Hudson Valley where we have some of America's oldest history, right? I think some of these homes represent those points, and they're real life examples where people get to encounter those, right? And not necessarily saying that everyone who walks by a property that is in the HTLO is going to go, oh, this is General something's house, but that the asset is there for the people who are looking for it, that they can kind of still go out and see that in their community. I think, and again, we can try and pull some data to look at this, but I think, and I get the point about density versus not, that historic districts and those that are well maintained are often the higher property value and higher sale price properties within communities when they are maintained, and so we can look into that. So I think that's a benefit. And then I don't know, who hasn't been to a community in the Hudson Valley where they've gone to kind of walk down a historic Main Street or Garfield Place or Academy Street in Poughkeepsie to go see these historic homes. So, I mean, I think it's tourism, it's cultural, it's historical, and then there is a value component of it too, I believe.
And is there guidance in sort of state law or whatever policy there would be about how we define historical?
Yes, there's the Department of State and the Department of the Interior standard, or the Interior Standards. I forget all the acronyms for it, but they have a state guideline, state guidance in terms of what is historic, what is significant, and how you would classify historic. So I think we shared that previously, but we can recirculate that in the packets as well. And the municipalities are allowed to make those stronger within their own communities, follow those guidelines, and apply them.
Right,
Yeah.
and presumably those guidelines are what you and John Clark used to identify historic features.
That's what your HCLO regulations are based off of. That chapter 137, 134. That's what it's based off of, is those standards. So when you go and you look at the criteria that you guys are looking at when you're determining what is significant, it is based off of those state standards as well.
Great.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Amber.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I mean, I'm no expert on this, but I think a benefit to a community is also just the variety of housing stock that comes with having historical properties. And Beacon especially is really interesting in that way because of the way that the city has evolved and the different kind of you know, the industrial bosses lived probably in the Victorians and the workers lived here. So I think there's something to varying the fabric of our eye line and our sight lines when we preserve historic properties, especially ones that are as varied as we have in Beacon, from the Victorian to the Italianate to the Cape to we have all these different styles that are just so interesting. So I would add that.
And I think we very often, I think when people think about these historic assets, think about, you know, the early 1900s, but it's actually, I think the standard, I'll have to look back to see what it is, but I think it's like 50 years.
Yeah.
So technically you could be going back to, you know, 1975.
Some
and,
mid-century moderns in there.
Yeah, could also be in there. So we do focus, I think, in the Hudson Valley on these kind of Victorians in that era, but we can re-include those in the package again if that's helpful.
And can you explain in terms of, that was very helpful in terms of, you know, reiterating the aesthetic historic connection in terms of a lens. For the cultural significance, I'm thinking about the Fishkill Avenue home where J.B. Forrestal was born, but no architectural features remain. I'm also thinking about St. Rocco's, where I was very compelled by the comments that were made 2 weeks ago, that St. Rocco's is very committed to their cultural and traditional work, and that's really the historic and cultural value they see as their sort of purpose as an organization, and are less precious about the architecture of the building. How should we be thinking about this when the regulation is purely aesthetic, but we're trying to preserve something unaesthetic?
Each one is unique, so I would say if we wanted to like dig in on that one specifically, we would look at the form for that, right? Because sometimes even though the structure, and Nick, feel free to jump in here because I know you did some of this research too after the last time this question was asked, but I'll start. Sometimes there is aspects of those homes, even though it's not the architectural feature, it can be something like the front porch, right? And it might not necessarily be the spindles or the corbels or anything like that, but it will be like something happened on this porch aspect. Or sometimes it's the surrounding around, if it's open area or if it's certain landscaping, sometimes that gets added in there. So I'd look at the exact form that John Clark drafted for that one, and it kind of comes down to, I think there's a bit of discretion to it in terms of what the form says and then how the planning board interprets that, because you can't anticipate what every change is going to be. But Nick, I know you did some research on that. I didn't know if you had anything you wanted to add.
I think Nick may have stepped away for a few minutes while we're having this discussion. But I'll just add on that point where you have a home that might be historic because of who lived there, but there might not be anything particularly unique or historic about the architectural features. Your code does contemplate that you could still designate that as historic just because a particular person of historic importance or cultural importance lived there, or was born there, or had some connection to that home or structure.
Sure, I understand that we're able to do that, but I'm trying to understand why we would do that. And what the, putting this sort of overlay on a property owner when we're not actually regulating anything material.
Yeah, we discussed 189 Fishkill Avenue, JVF House, at our first workshop about this. And I think the solution was to look what is the standard of dealing with this particular type of properties. It might be just we require a plaque, because it's vinyl siding. If a person wants to put shingles, we're not going to allow shingles because it has a vinyl siding. It's I think the plan was to get an answer how it's done in other communities.
Yeah, along that line, the other thing I observed in kind of talking with some folks is that it would help us if we were very specific about which physical features we would think would trigger a certificate of appropriateness if it were removed or substantially altered. And, for instance, we may want to specify, the facade facing the street, a porch, a fourth-story tower, right? Those very specific ones. And then on the example that you're asking, it might be there are no particular features, but rather it's just that the house needs to remain in some fashion.
Yeah.
I don't know. right?
Major demolition, like major significant demolition or new additions, major additions might be considered, heavily considered when getting your certificate of appropriateness, whether that's appropriate for that historic building.
Right, this is the first time we developed these inventory forms, and we're using the ones from several years ago. But each time we learn something, and I think being more specific would help the homeowners, right?
Yeah.
And would also clarify to the building department, oh, yeah, you can change the windows, right? But it's the porch here that people were identifying when it was enacted.
Another concern I have, and I'm sorry if I missed this in any of the regulations, but if somebody needs to retrofit their home for ADA compliance, especially if we want people to age in place, and that might, require getting rid of a porch, or, by design, a lot of these historic homes have a lot of stairs.
Yep.
Are there carve-outs for that?
I think that, again, it comes down to how I've seen this actually play out in real life, right? Is it's encouraged, to put those types of additions towards the rear of the property or towards the side of the property. I've seen screening be used if you're using a side entrance and you're turning that into a ramp rather than stairs. So again, it's unique to each individual property, but I think the solution is generally to not have it be in the public-facing facade if you can avoid that, to kind of the mayor's point about. And then I'll just direct everyone to section C, to Paloma's question about how would the planning board consider when granting a certificate of appropriateness, the House of Forester, right? So they have the 4 prongs there, and I think if we walk through those together, we could kind of assume how they would do it, right? So things like the historic or architectural value or significance of the structure and its relation to the historic character. So they would read through the significance, see if there's any portion of that house that really, besides someone famous living there, had an aspect. If that's not in the designation or the determination of significance, if you're changing the front porch, I think they would say no. Or if you're changing the color, I think they would say no, it's not there. It's not applying. The relationship of is the relationship of identified historic features of such a structure or the rest of the structure and surrounding area, if there's a change to that. So I think they have those 4 actions, and so I would, I think we want a real answer here that with these properties that are not being designated necessarily for their architectural features, they're probably going to have much more latitude in terms of what they can change. But I will say there is aspects even in that one about bracketed windows and detailed front porches and things like that. So even for these minor ones, there are, or not minor, these less architectural beauty ones, there are still aspects there that the small pieces that do remain that I think the planning board would try to hold on to.
Yeah, my question was more hypothetical than necessarily, or conceptual rather than necessarily considering each of these pieces.
Yeah.
But I understand what you're saying.
I think with these designations, it really does come down to specific sites rather than hypotheticals, right? Because they're being designated for their uniqueness.
So this one particularly says that the current building has been covered over with vinyl siding. All the former architectural details are gone. Pretty. There's a porch, but it doesn't say that it has any elements, decorative elements.
Well, it still talks about bay windows. There's still a bay window existing there, right? There's a porch. If someone was going to try and remove that porch, I think the planning board would probably give that pause if they were trying to eliminate it altogether, right? So even though if it's not like a detailed corbel or something, there's still aspects that I think they would try to hold on to because they've been lost. So if someone was trying to put different siding on this, how would the planning board consider that? And I would say they'd probably read that piece and say the siding has already been modified, so unless somebody's bringing it back to the original, then it's probably pretty open to allow you to do different types of materials there.
Okay.
I have a question about why we don't consult the planning board ahead of time before we make these designations. If the point of the statute is we're going to ask the planning board at the time that a revision is made whether it's appropriate to make such a revision, why wouldn't we just ask them up front to name which sections of the home are relevant for the regulation?
You can jump in on code, Jennifer, if you want, but I think not any. first of all, the code gives that power to the council, right? I think you could absolutely consult the planning board on it. Not all of them are historical preservation specialists, right? But that's what they use the determination of significance that gets adopted by this body to then review those applications. Same way that they use the sign code, right? They're not making up their own determination about signs and whether they like signs or not. They use the code that's adopted by this legislative body to then review the signs that come before them. So I think in the same way, they kind of use these forms, not to say that they couldn't be consulted.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. I think that, they would probably comment on, looking at it from the perspective of how are we going to implement this? Like, if this property is designated as historic, are there enough details, to the mayor's point earlier, are there enough details in this form to allow us to really identify the features that were important to the city council when it was designated as historic, in order to allow the planning board to do their job in preserving what this council determined was important. But they're not the experts in historic preservation on what is historic and what's not historic and what is worthy of preservation. That's not that any of you are historic experts either, but you rely on your consultants and members of the public, and you're the elected officials to make that decision, and the planning board implements that.
So I come up with 3 to-dos so far that I heard. One is, this would probably be an ask of Natalie to go through the forms and think about identifying features, right? Because I think that would make the job easier. I think we had the good fortune of having our planner was John Clark, who was also a history nut for his homes, and he did these forms, and he knew what a barge board was, and I don't know any of those other things either, right? So that's the one. The second one is to develop a set of FAQs, and then the third one is to split the group into those we could move forward on and those we might want to hold for a little while. Does that sound about right to folks?
Well, I think for that, I just want clarification
Yeah,
on
of
that
course.
last point. I think for the last point, the idea was to share the FAQs, have this next public hearing, because with some of the information provided in the FAQs, all those who opposed them previously might not be opposed.
Yeah.
Or it might shift. Those who were in favor may no longer, so that clarification, right? We'll wait until after the public hearing to split them out.
I think we need to wait until after the next public hearing for that specific reason. And then, I may be misremembering this, but the set of forms that we have now that John Clark didn't he also work with somebody from like the Historical Society?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Right.
A lot of the information was pulled from the 1979 historic inventory that SHPO, National Park Service, did across the Hudson Valley in major communities in the Hudson Valley back in 1979. So there's a lot of information that. So I think John Clark used that, started his forms, and then kind of went back out there and verified. So,
that does sound right. I just wanted to kind of make sure everybody had that context on where some of the information in the forms was coming from. It wasn't like just pulled out of thin air.
I have just 2 questions. So related to that, we know that the one objection, I think it was 17 Church, the people that had just bought their home, the barge boards had been removed, so the form needs to be updated.
Yeah.
Do you have a process for that? I'm just checking that you have a process for that, or anything else that's been updated since this.
Yeah, we'll take a look. So I think
Yeah.
we'll ask Natalie for a little help there, right?
Great.
So-
And my other question is, so, going forward, and we have a public hearing, and we provide an FAQ, and we give people a compelling reason to put their property onto this HDLO, and so perhaps we get some more people on board. If we have anybody who we don't hear from, either positively or negatively, do we move forward and assume that they've been given warning? I just want to be super clear about that.
I think that's an individual decision for each council member to take. I would, but other people may feel differently, so I think that's like a discussion topic. There's no set rule that says the absence of, a yes or a no from somebody means one thing or the other, so I think it comes down to your individual preference.
And
I would like to put it to a vote.
Yeah, that's something we would have to talk about in workshop, is like, do you want to move these forward, yes or no, based on the consensus of the council? And
That's where I almost would want to break it up then, and these people were positive about, these people were negative, and these people we never
Yeah.
heard from, so we could vote on those instead of as a whole block.
Now, the one
Sure.
thing I wanted to ask, do we want to get up a set of FAQs, distribute them to everyone, and hold the public hearing back until they've had a chance to review that? Because I'm not sure that's doable in 2 weeks.
That was kind of why I was asking at the front of this if that was our timing. And I don't see a huge rush or like super need here to like move this forward with haste. So I don't have any objection to delaying the public hearing a little bit further for people to have more time to absorb the information.
I think the FAQ form can be done, but the other comment about updating the forms and going back through and reassessing, that's going to take a little bit longer, I think, than we did do a quick drive-by of these properties, but I think that's a piece that will take a little bit longer than the FAQs, and we want to have those forms right, I think, so.
Might I ask a question as well from the council? Is your intention that these would be mailed out to each of the property owners that were initially mailed the materials to? And if so, we can certainly get them out quickly after the sheets are done, but there is some uncertainty about how long that will take in the once it goes to the USPS. And the secondary question is, do you want the updated forms mailed out too, just so I can plan and have that ready to go?
I think it would be ideal to mail. I think it would also be good to put the FAQ on the city website for anybody to reference. I think it's good information for anyone in the community to be aware of. I do think that we should also mail an updated form if it is updated, or at least tell somebody, hey, we reviewed and there were no changes. So, I mean, yeah, again, if we have to delay this, we have to delay this. Probably the easiest thing to do is mail the FAQ and the form together, and then if there is no updated, just mail the old form back again, and something like that.
All very doable.
Clarifying question. So when you're saying updating the forms, do you also mean taking fresh photographs of each property? And I'm asking it because there are a couple houses that are definitely look different than what we have in the forms, and then if we hold people accountable to these photographs, then it's not fair to the homeowners.
So I did do an assessment, right, and drove around. It was winter, so I was taking new pictures sparingly, right, because I think everything looks a little bit worse for wear in winter. Where there was a change, like I think actually the Church Street property did have an updated photo on there because some of the porch aspects had changed. Where it was kind of wear and tear, I did not take a new photo, right, because wear and tear is upkeep. But if a historical feature that I could identify from the form was then missing, we did new forms. But I can pay attention to that. I think in updating the forms, what I was thinking about was giving more specificity. I think there's general talk about the form of the style of the house and what period it was built in, but I think there's not as much of a direct discussion on features, remaining features for all of them. So I think making those very clear where we can was the intent. But yes, I think if a home is substantially different and it's not just normal wear and tear from the photo that exists, we can update that.
Like, for example, 194 Fishkill, the back porch is very different, the back bay windows are very different, and some other features are different, and that just...
well, we wouldn't normally be taking pictures of the back
but
porch.
they are
The
shown
side
here.
porch then.
Side porch,
Yeah.
sorry, it's
Yeah.
a corner property, yeah, side porch.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yep.
And it sounds like, and I think FAQs will look to legal for help, and Jennifer, that's all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we can do a draft, and it's like I may be able to provide some input as to questions people might naturally ask, because I've done a few. I will try to do a few more, knocks on doors and get a little bit more input. And then if Natalie, you could take lead on the forms. And I think what we'll need is, if we're not ready in 2 weeks, then we'll adjourn the hearing for a little while, and we'll adjust as we go. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yes.
Do you have someone from the Historical Society that you want to weigh in on the forms as well at this point?
I have reached out. I haven't asked them to do anything, but if you want some help on that, I can ask. Yeah, let me do that. Okay?
Very good.
Thanks, Natalie.
All right.
The only other thing that I would add on that then is the next meeting that we would have a hearing on would be the 1st of June. And if that is the way that we go with this, I can reach out and notify the people who emailed comments. I can let them know that we're going to probably push it back to the 1st, because I know at least one of them had said that they plan to come on the 18th. And so is the council's intention that you would just adjourn the hearing outright until we give them more information? Or would you open the hearing for anyone who wants to come to discuss anyhow, without the updated information?
My inclination is to go ahead and make the call now that we'll postpone to June 1st to give everybody notice and ample time for USPS to deliver our mail.
I think that's appropriate, Paloma.
Okay.
I think technically speaking, we'll have to make
a
that
motion.
decision on the 18th, but we can sort of informally make that decision now.
Yeah, I think setting that expectation is a good idea. And again, just kind of lets people know we are working through the feedback. And, you know, there's nothing to talk about at the moment, but we will gladly talk about it some more.
Okay.
And anyone is welcome to give us public comment at any time.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we've got some next steps, and that's good. All right. Thank you all. Are we okay to go to parking data?
Oh, yes.
All right. So who's got this one?
This is me.
Okay.
I'm gonna,
Thank you, Natalie.
yeah, I'll just share I didn't do a slide deck or anything, but I will share the memo while I walk everyone through it, just so it's up on the screen as well. So there's two pieces in the form. We'll kind of go through the memo first, and then the second piece, in your packet, I mean, and the second piece is kind of an Excel table of the various projects. So as a reminder, in August of 2024, the council adopted updated parking regulations citywide. It did split the city into two kind of categories. There are the more kind of mixed-use districts like the CMS, the Linkage, the Waterfront District that allowed a elimination of parking minimums. So rather than saying you require a minimum of this many spaces per unit or per square footage, those minimums were removed, and there were maximums. And this is, so you can still provide parking, but it was an idea of best utilization of that space in these kind of walkable mixed-use districts rather than having large parking lots. In the other kind of outer districts that maybe aren't as served by walkable kind of street networks or public transit, the parking minimums were reduced in those districts. So, and this is kind of, for those of you who weren't here, there's a lot, we talked about this for a long time, and there's a lot of municipalities that are doing this and a lot of research behind the mentality of this, of kind of allowing the market to dictate how much parking is provided. So with those changes, I think the council made a wise decision that for the first kind of 3 years as this policy is being implemented, to have, to track that and see what is happening. So the council requested from the planning board that they look at the following factors, kind of the number of applications in each zoning district, the required number of parking spaces provided for each application, a comparison between what was provided versus what would have previously been required, and then any other information that the planning board deemed necessary. So what's in this report is from August 2024 to the end of last year. So we went all of 2025 plus those few months in 2024. The methodology here, we went, it was Jennifer and I went through kind of all the past agendas and just made a note of every application and kind of summarized that. That's what's in the table. We excluded some withdrawn. If there was an application that was withdrawn, we excluded those. Otherwise, everything is in that table. And I kind of talked about the two applications that were withdrawn. It was a new garage with an accessory dwelling unit that was taken away, and then an amended facade, which wouldn't have had necessarily an applicable parking requirement. We provided in the report, the planning board provided in the report a summary of those applications. So 10 approved applications, 4 that at the time of the cutoff for this report were still under review, and then the 2 withdrawn ones that we discussed. The regulation or the applications review did span a few different parking districts or a few different zoning districts. They weren't all in the Linkage or the CMS. There was some in a number of the residential districts, the GB, the T, and then a few that were within the HTLO. And so that's really where you get the project by project summary in the Excel sheet. For outcomes, I'll just summarize. Here's kind of the data summary of it. Of the 10 that were approved, 4 actually provided exactly the same parking that they would have been required to provide under the previous regulations. 3 provided a little bit less, right? 1 to 3 spaces less than they would have been required under the previous regulations. 2 projects provided significantly less in the amount of 20 to 40 spaces less. And 1 project actually provided more than they would have been required to previously, but that's a little bit of a unique situation because there used to be a provision in the code. It was called the 1964 exemption that Jennifer will tell you all about, it required 0 parking for certain projects. So this was one that would have been exempt from parking under that exemption, and they actually provided parking on site. I think overall, we're seeing kind of, obviously it's varying, right? From that summary, it depends on the location. I think some of the really significant reductions were Main Street districts, right? We're kind of on Main Street where full infill development was encouraged. And then I think one of the big caveats that's kind of at the bottom of page 2 is these are all projected numbers, right? And not what's going to be provided, that is on their site plan, it must be required. But I think what's going to come up and what you'll hear a lot as you read through the planning board's feedback is worth noting that many of these projects have not yet been built and are not under construction, right? So we're not seeing the full effects yet of what happens and how this plays out. And then you have, the planning board did decide to give kind of their general thoughts on some things. So that's what you have on page 3 and 4. So overall, I think they really thought this was a good exercise. It was good for the board to take a step back and look at these applications kind of from a higher level to see what was really playing out. I think many of them shared the thought that it has streamlined the process. This 1964 exemption was an arduous process where you had to kind of go back through old records to try and figure out when the building was built, what was the parking requirement at that time using old codes, and then if there was a difference. So it was like this whole kind of historic research calculation thing that had to happen. So that's definitely streamlined the review. And now the planning board is looking more at what do you anticipate your demand to be? Where are you anticipating these people to park? If you do think you're going to need parking, if it's not on site, it's encouraging a lot more kind of working with other properties and getting agreements to kind of share parking that may be underutilized. So there's still a lot of discussion around it, but it is not as lengthy as that previous kind of historical analysis.
Okay.
This point comes up a few of these points kind of touch on monitoring utilization. So I think the board discussed a lot when drafting this report of what are we really looking at? Like, do we really care that these properties aren't necessarily providing 4 parking spaces on their site, or do we care where are these people parking and how are they parking? And I think the board was leaning towards the latter, that they understand that not every site is actually appropriate to have or necessary to have parking there, but there was a lot of questions that came up. Where are they parking then? Are they parking on the street? Are they parking in municipal lots? What happens in snowstorms, right? That came up in terms of when we were in the middle of this winter when they had that massive snowstorm. So like, where did everybody park when this happened? So that was a question. I think there was also an additional research question about trying to better categorize how this impacts density. So this obviously isn't the only factor that is impacting density. So we could look at, okay, with this, if you would have cut off so much square footage of this building so that you could put these parking spaces here, how many units are there? That could give us some picture. It's not going to give us the full picture of like the density being provided, but I think there was a question about thinking about looking at that. And then again, with regards to parking study and utilization, also this could be paired nicely with looking at improvements to alternative modes of transportation, as well as kind of parking management in terms of regulating hours. If a parking space says 2 hours limited, are we really impacting that to keep or regulating that to keep the flow? So I think that was the planning board's kinds of thoughts of, while this is great exercise for the next 3 years, this really pairs nicely not only into review of private development applications, but also policy that the council is going to be considering. So that is the report. And And again, this is year one, so I think overall the sentiment was, let's keep tracking this and keep building this. I think the other thing that I started doing while going through this was compiling all the developer-provided parking utilization analyses. So every time now the planning board is asking them to look at the municipal lots around them and to do utilization counts. So we're getting these little pinpoints of utilization. So I've started to kind of compile all those reports. So in 3 years, we could also use that to kind of show a little bit of a trend and how kind of municipal lots and on-street parking is changing, if it's changing. In addition to, parking studies can be expensive. It's, you know, usually 20 to 40,000 if you want to do like just a utilization analysis. If you want them to do recommendations, it's more. Updates can be a little bit less, but it's an expenditure. So we already have developers, property owners doing these analyses with the same engineering firms we would use as a municipality to do them. So we can definitely track those and keep those records.
Yeah, that was one of my major questions. My understanding is the last time we did a complete parking study, at least around Main Street, was for the Main Street Access Committee, which I believe was in 2021. And my question to you, Natalie, is do you recommend a certain pace of when we should be checking in on this? I didn't realize that study may have cost us $40,000.
I think that one may have just been done by John Clark. I'd have to look at it to see. I remember John had those maps. I don't know if that was done by a firm. So it might have, I don't know what the cost was if we did it with an in-house planner.
Yeah. I do remember it was an assessment of a single day. We picked a busy sort of leaf peeping day, and they just did a count of all of our parking lots.
On Main Street.
The committee did it.
On municipal lots, and they did that together. Yeah.
Okay, so it was sort of volunteer done?
Okay. We do have a report from a couple of years before that, though, that was a more formal. Do you remember which one?
I think that was the 2014 parking analysis report that was done. And then this piece was done as like an update to that.
Okay. I guess my question still stands. How often should we be doing this?
I don't know if there's a best practice kind of standard out there for utilization studies, right? Because the moment you do it, it does change, right? So I think that would have to be a policy and expenditure decision by the council to think about that, I think.
Yeah, I would think that it would be a function of if you see substantial change in the infrastructure of buildings and therefore parking, then you would think about it. But if there isn't substantial change, you'd kind of wonder, why do I need to do an update, right? I would think that would relate to it. So it's not a fixed time as much as do we have a sense that a lot has changed?
Yeah, or for example, like Kingston's embarking on one right now, citywide, right? They're doing their downtown area, but that's because they adopted, I think they adopted a zoning code that eliminated it citywide, parking regulations, and don't necessarily have a handle on their municipal parking and what's available where and pricing and timing and everything like that. So it's usually, it's pushed by some kind of need or demand, but I don't think it's not like a comp plan that the recommendation is every 10 years. It's as needed.
Okay.
And I'd be interested in a study, not just on the spaces available, but on the worth of the space. I am a big fan of Doug Shoup. I know that I've heard you reference him. I have been waiting for my moment to bring up that I read The High Cost of Free Parking. And I think we did get a little bit ahead of ourselves, like the previous council got, by eliminating parking minimums without putting a cost on the parking that we give away for free on our city streets. And, without looking at some sense of mirroring or permitting, parking management, it's good to be aware of how many spaces we have and how many spaces developers are promising to their tenants and everything. But this is something very valuable that we have that we're giving away. And I would be curious if there's a way to get a sense of how much it is worth, all that parking that we have.
I've definitely seen parking studies, parking analyses kind of go that way, right? You start with the utilization. Utilization's key. You also start with like an inventory of different types, right? I think it's not only municipal, but where are you seeing private that's not fully occupied that could be shared, and how do you encourage that? So, and then recommendations, which usually gets into things like enforcing time limits and having various parking, or having different pricing for different parking that's more valuable, or that you want to see higher turnover, better signage, kind of folks directing people to where parking is, things like that. Better apps, right, that can start actually tracking parking without doing individual utilization analyses every few years. So that definitely comes into some of the policy considerations typically at the end of a parking study.
Yeah.
Something the planning board brought up, and you might have mentioned and I missed it, is the danger of unintentionally over-allocating or double counting available municipal parking, where the same developer banks certain amount of parking spots at municipal lots. Like, what are procedures in place to prevent that?
I don't think that's something you need to prevent, actually, is the argument that I keep making to the planning board. So I actually think that's one of the best benefits of a utilization study, because it is not one for one. I think that's what we find in communities actually, as you start to make them more walkable, is because there's a formula out there that was typically pulled from ITE standards based on suburban conditions that said there needs to be 5 parking spaces associated with this building. That doesn't mean there's necessarily going to be 5 cars. So there is probably overlap, right? You do have property owners, a lot of people kind of identifying the municipal lot that's nearby, saying we're going to utilize that. And we have been tracking, and the planning board is asking applicants to do that of, okay, we'll look at all the other past projects, and that's part of the report that you see in the column where we started kind of tracking what lot did they identify. But I would caution folks from saying, just because a project waived 15 parking spaces and identified that lot as being available, that you're actually going to see 15 cars materialize there from that one project, right? So I think that would come down, I think how you would really get the real sense of that is utilization analyses, right? To see, once these projects are all built and occupied, then doing an analysis of those lots to see. I don't think you're ever going to get the one for one, like this person is associated with that building, but you could see how utilization has shifted.
Just purely empirically, there's several parking lots where it's almost impossible to park on any given day, morning, evening, afternoon. They're just full all the time.
Mm-hmm. I think that gets to the comments that we were talking about of, so just because one lot's full, does that, so people will find somewhere else to park, right? Whether that's on street or another lot and have to walk further. There's ways of trying to manage that by putting time limits on those lots or putting higher costs on those lots to discourage people from parking there and staying there all day, or parking there, or residents parking there on busy weekend, you know. So I think it's 2 pieces. I think, yes, absolutely, there are hot spots that there's ways to kind of manage those more aggressively than areas, and kind of push people who have the ability to park a little bit further out to park there. And then there's also this, like, what is the real materialization of these parking spaces and these parking requirements or these parking counts in real life?
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is the Main Street Access Committee identified those spots, you know, and we've kind of known them behind Main Street where Van Nydek is, so basically from the Memorial Building to the Howland Center.
Yeah.
And then the Churchill Street lot, and then the small lot on the corner of Main Street and Verplank tend to be full. Did that get close to where you were thinking? Yeah. And
Also, the one between Beacon Bread Co. and Lux Optique is always full.
okay.
Yeah, it's a really small lot, but that one is
the
continually
corner one
full.
there.
Yeah.
Is that the?
Yeah, that's a small lot.
Yeah.
We're actually going to see a proposal for some additional parking on that first block coming to council soon, because there's some work there. But we have in our head too, kind of improving spaces there. I originally had thought with the Main Street Access Committee, we were going to go in some direction of some kind of a parking structure or some kind of a parking charge. And, you know, their recommendations were take your time, don't go down that way. Parking's going to go down over time. And I took that to heart. But the one area behind Van Nydek, we're working on it now, which is taking the firehouse parking lot and getting an agreement with the old city building next door to share, to make a joint lot from that on a lease basis. And I actually walked next door yesterday with the Verizon building next door. And if you could take all three of those, that would be a great opportunity. There's also a potential of getting parking somewhere else, but we're looking at that. That's the area that kind of needs it the most, right? And the only other thing I'd say is that the commercial tax rate is about 35 to 50% higher than the homeowner rate. In effect, Main Street kind of pays for, through their taxes for some benefit. And in some respects, parking in a shared system, which is a lot more efficient than an isolated system, is one of those benefits, at least in my head. So.
I think we also, if we want to encourage people to come here and not have a car, we need to talk about our bike comprehensive plan, and we need to talk about public transportation as viable options. And the other thing is, since we've lost, a general store on Main Street, a lot more people are getting deliveries. And I think something else we might want to think about are having better loading zones and having places where trucks can do their last mile delivery. There's a ton of double parking on Main Street. It's dangerous, especially as people are looking for, to parallel park. There's always a chance of something happening when you have that situation. And I think it would be worth sacrificing parking for dedicated places where a truck could unload and then maybe use a cargo bike or a hand truck to make that delivery. But to keep those spaces open would work, because I'm trying to think of how would a resident who we're inviting to live in Beacon, and we're saying, this is a place, it's a walkable, you don't need to have a car, we've gotten rid of parking, like you've got this apartment, you have access to transportation, like what can we do to accommodate the life of someone like that?
I would also add that as we encourage people to park more in municipal lots and side streets, that we think about parking enforcement as well. I think a lot of the quality of life concerns come from people who are obviously double parked or parked in people's driveways, things that we should be enforcing on anyway. And thinking about what those enforcement resources will generate, is that self-sustaining, and can we support having at least enforcement proactively during the busiest times, and what that might do to alleviate the quality of life concerns with parking.
And I do want to recognize something that was mentioned last year when the zoning changes were made in a couple areas around Main Street, allowing greater density. It was recognized potentially by you, Natalie, might have been by, I don't remember, that with the increased Main Street parking and then allowing density on those streets, people might not always be able to park in front of their house. And that's, as we potentially work further to increase density in areas closer to Main Street, that might become, those side streets might become more and more utilized. And I do want to throw my support yet again behind bike infrastructure, because that's a viable way to give people an alternative to driving, and many people won't until they feel safe, even if it's a perception.
Okay, so this was just the report. I don't think we're going to reach any conclusions on it, but I just want to move us along.
So I did have two things. I'll try and keep them concise. One, I noted, to your point, Carolyn, about the fact that free parking isn't in fact free. We did discuss that on council and workshop a few years ago, and the decision, at least that I came to, was that what we were getting in exchange was greater density and more units. And I was interested that the report had no conclusive information on whether this regulation has had any effect on density. And I'm curious if there's any criteria that we should be tracking that would help us answer that question, or if there's another way if we can track that, because that was the gamble that I made, or the payoff that I decided to go with instead of charging for parking.
I mean, I think we could give you a number based on a number of assumptions. I just didn't figure that a fact-based council like this would really want like a number that's going to be based on space, right? Because to try to analyze, okay, what would this project have been if you had to, if the parking requirement was fully applied,
Mm-hmm.
we could tell you how many spaces that would be, right? And then so like if the building took up the full site, we could calculate that based on, well, this is what you would have had to have. But could they have done structured parking under the ground level in the back, right? Could they
Right.
have, you know, like, could they have gotten a partial variance? So we could give a number.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know you could, as long as no one's gonna say, our reduction of parking minimums provided this many new units.
I mean, I think any kind of data would be good, and just
Yeah.
give us the caveat so we know how to read it.
Yeah.
I think what you just named of this is the number of spaces that would have been required, and that's the square footage. We can maybe extrapolate one or two things from that. I think that would be helpful, and I think that would be a good, I don't know if we need to decide that we're formally adding that as criteria E.
Yeah.
But I did want to sort of dig into that because that was the cost benefit. And then in terms of demand reduction overall, I recognize that the planning board sort of is encouraging the council to continue to look into this. My recollection of the discussion from 2 years ago was that your recommendation was to sort of give examples of demand reduction strategies, like putting bike racks on site, or developers or landlords providing stipends for residents to bike or bus, or employees if it's a business. I'm wondering if we can add another criteria, even if it's anecdotal, to note if any of these sort of demand reduction strategies were taken up by
To the table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, to Sergey and Carolyn's point, the only way to really move the needle on that is for the city to take on a significant change in the infrastructure and supporting people biking or walking, or putting pressure on the county to improve our bus system. But as we are trying to hold landlords and developers accountable to this benefit we're giving them of lowering the parking minimums, I do want to be tracking what the benefits we're getting back are.
Yeah, I don't know if you have thoughts on that last one, because it's like, it's curious, like, I don't know if the planning board has been placing conditions on property owners. It would be interesting once these projects get built to then figure out what they're doing in terms of the marketing of their, like, I think you could track bike racks on site, right? You can track things like that. But in terms of like what incentives, or the unbundling of parking, unbundling of parking from the cost of a unit and things like that.
Yeah, so that's exactly the example I was thinking of, the bundling of the parking space with the unit. I mean, we as the city are not going to know how they're, we don't regulate that in terms of how they market their units and how they package that. Certainly something like bike racks, we can track that. We can also track, whether, a lot of these properties are utilizing during their peak periods, for example, valet parking, or shuttle bus service to some of these off-site locations that they're going to be utilizing. So there are other mechanisms that they're using in order to make the parking work for them, for their demand, based on the space they have on site and then the publicly available facilities. But yeah, we won't be able to track if the developer is using some of these parking reduction strategies in their pricing or their marketing. That'll be much more difficult to track.
Yeah, we heard an anecdotal thing at traffic safety that people were getting tickets because their landlord promised them that it was okay to park here and stay as long as you want. But I can see how that's impossible to track. And I also, I just want to say for the record, because getting back to the original topic, I just wanted to thank the planning board for this awesome document, because it is really helpful to see it all in one place, and just like to start to keep track of it. This is good legislation, and I'm glad that we're doing it, and it's important to see it all in one place.
Yeah, that's the same feedback that I would give, is that I appreciate the report. I think it was very thorough, so this should kind of be a benchmark or a best standard for future reporting on the matter and other topics that we've asked for bringbacks on. So I think this was a really good model, and I appreciate their focus on it.
Okay. Everybody good?
Yes.
So let's go. Jennifer, we have you here to talk about comp plan.
Yes.
You're on.
Okay, thank you. So on your agenda tonight is a discussion about the comprehensive plan. And I'm here to talk really, I mean, we're not going to like dig into the 2017 comprehensive plan. I brought my copy with me, but we're not going to dig into it and go chapter by chapter tonight. We're going to talk much more broadly, big picture concepts in terms of, you know, just a quick refresh on what the comp plan is, what its purpose is, some general process for updating the comprehensive plan, and then what the city council's role is in that process. So that's sort of the rough outline of what I have prepared for you guys tonight. So the comprehensive plan is a document that it is the city council's document, it is the policy, the vision, the setting of the goals for the community. It is very heavily relied on with public participation and public comment. That is really what drives a lot of the recommendations that you see in the comp plan. It covers, you know, it's your vision and goals for the community based on a broad range of topics, things like, you know, everything from parking and transportation that we just spent a lot of time talking about, regional needs, housing needs, including affordable housing, socioeconomic demands in the community, utilities, water, sewer, historic resources, cultural resources. It really runs a pretty broad spectrum. So that is the policy document for the city. By contrast, what flows from the comprehensive plan is your zoning laws. The zoning laws are the tools that you use to implement the goals and the vision that are set forth in the comprehensive plan. It's what brings those goals to life in the real world. Those zoning laws have to be adopted in accordance with the comprehensive plan, so you can't adopt, it would be inappropriate for you to adopt a local law that was inconsistent with a stated policy. So for example, if you decided, you know, we want to bring back all the factories and industrial uses along Fishkill Creek, you know, that is our vision for Beacon, and you were to create a zoning district along Fishkill Creek that only allowed housing and city parks, that would be inconsistent with the stated goal of the comprehensive plan. Now, the comprehensive plan, it's a living, breathing document, and this community in particular, as compared to a lot of other communities I work with or work in, really you take a lot of measures to implement the comprehensive plan year to year, not only through your zoning, but even through you know, your discussions with Hudson River. Housing, yes, thank you. I always forget the third name. You know, your discussions with Hudson River Housing about your BMR units and how to increase affordability in Beacon, all of those discussions and those measures that come out of those discussions, those are all ways that you're implementing your comprehensive plan. So it doesn't always have to be in the form of zoning laws. But you have also been very active over the past several years in implementing zoning laws. The parking reform that we just spent time talking about is an example. So while your comprehensive plan is almost 10 years old at this point, next year it will be 10 years old, you have been very active in implementing that 2017 plan over the years. So that brings us to timing. Typically, 10 years is the standard in terms of when you should look at your comprehensive plan to figure out whether there's an update that's needed. The New York State General City Law actually doesn't provide a time frame. They leave that up to the individual communities to determine what the time frame is for your periodic review. Your charter sets a 10-year time frame look back. So you have your 2007 comprehensive plan, your 2017 update. So next year you would be due to consider an update for your comprehensive plan. So it's good that we're having this discussion tonight, and it's good that you're starting to think about this, because there are a lot of sort of like pre-steps that you should be thinking about. And I can turn it over to Natalie to talk in a little bit about some of the, you know, grant opportunities and funding opportunities that it's good to get started on that now. But just in terms of general process, what this statute envisions and what generally happens is either the planning board or a special committee is typically the board or committee that sort of controls the process and really does a lot of the, you know, rolling up the sleeves and getting the work done. So typically what we've seen is that the city council would appoint members to a committee. I think under your charter, the mayor has the authority to appoint upon confirmation of the city council. I would recommend that you select a consultant. You did use a consultant in the past 2 comprehensive plans. For the first one, it was F.P. Clark. And for the comprehensive plan update in 2017, you utilized BFJ Planning, who does a lot of comprehensive planning throughout the region. So I would recommend that, you know, at some point this year, you would put out an RFP to select a consultant to help in that process. Once the committee is set, once you have a consultant identified, the next step is really, you know, public engagement. The committee is required to hold a series of meetings, to have a series of public engagement meetings. They're also required to have a public hearing, so a notice public hearing, and that's at that committee level. Once the committee sort of completes the draft of the comprehensive plan, they would send that back to the city council with their recommendation that this is what we've heard from the community. These are our recommendations for the comprehensive plan. You would then, as the city council and the approval authority for that comp plan, would need to also hold a public hearing before you considered adoption. That comprehensive plan also needs to be referred to county planning. That's a statutory requirement, and you have the option to also send it to the planning board. Not a requirement, but certainly recommended. So that's, you know, a rough outline of the steps involved. But really, the bulk of the work is typically done through the committee and with public engagement. Interviews, workshop meetings, charrettes, all of those sort of tools, surveys, hearings, all of those tools are used to solicit public comment and really drive those recommendations. So Natalie, I know we had previously discussed that there's some opportunities available for funding, and now is a good time to kind of start thinking about that process.
Yeah. So the program that most often gets used to help fund comprehensive plans or comprehensive rezonings or strategic planning initiatives is the Smart Growth Community Planning Program, operated through DOS. So you're all probably familiar of the Consolidated Funding Application, or CFA. It happens every year.
Department of State.
Department of State, what did I say?
DOS.
Oh, sorry.
I'm
Department of
just,
State.
yeah.
Yes, thank you. So the Consolidated Funding Application happens every year. It kind of gets announced in May, June, with applications due at the end of July. So this kind of started, I think this was under Governor Cuomo when he did this, that all the different state agencies kind of had them put their funding applications into one time period, right? So they all kind of come out at the same time. So this program through DOS comes out in that consolidated funding application. So it should be, they usually announce it right about now, every year. They're due at the end of, applications are due at the end of July, and then you usually find out by end of the year whether or not you've been awarded. So to Jennifer's point about thinking about kind of applying for that, it's a great program. It does cover up to 90% of the cost. You are more competitive if you cover more than just the 10%, right? They want to see you put in what you can, but it is a great way that if you are going to be going out for a consultant, these initiatives, depending whether you're doing a strategic update or a full kind of rewrite, can cost in the tens of thousands, 100,000. When I was working for the city of Poughkeepsie, we did comp plan and zoning. It was over 250,000 to kind of do those, like they can be lengthy. There's a lot of existing conditions analysis. There's a lot of data collection. There's a lot of public engagement, whether that be through kind of town hall style meetings or kind of one-on-one kind of workshops and things like that. So it's definitely a heavy lift, and that's why the state kind of created this funding mechanism to help municipalities complete that work. So that is something that would, that does kind of put you, if you are awarded the money at the end of the year, there is a little bit of a contracting period with Department of State. But often what I found that they've allowed municipalities to do is while you're doing that contract and getting that signed with the state, you can start working on your request for proposals, your RFP, and kind of putting that out there and trying to find interested consultants that you think can kind of provide the report that you're looking at. The one other thing I'll say with the communities that I've worked with to update comprehensive plans, there has been a shift in recent years from doing like this, what used to be everything in the kitchen sink comprehensive plan, to still doing that existing conditions analysis on a wide basis, but then getting very strategic. I think what folks have started to realize is 10 years can come quite quickly, and especially if you are updating every 10 years. So kind of picking priority areas, whether, that be certain topics or for kind of key geographic areas or whatever makes sense for your community. So rather than doing kind of this large document that sits on a shelf, of really trying to come up with something that is a roadmap for what you can realistically accomplish in the next 10 years.
And I think we saw that in the 2017 update. It was really focused on the waterfront. Well, it was, its main focus. I mean, it had some other issues as well, but you really had more of a targeted approach in that update.
Yeah, let me just offer some historical perspective. So I got on the council in 93, and I actually read our comprehensive plan. And there was a 1965 urban renewal plan, and then they had a plan from the early 70s that sort of put it in a comp plan approach. And it was not just out of date, it was absolutely the wrong direction. I mean, it was like turning Main Street into a mall, 13-story high-rises on either end, getting rid of Main Street down to the waterfront, maintaining industrial zoning. It was just, pretty amazing. So under Mayor Gould's leadership, I had wanted to do a comp plan update. She chose instead to do pieces of the puzzle. And because there was so much that needed to change, it was actually a good approach. So we did Main Street. We undid the ground floor apartments on Main Street. We got rid of the 13-story high-rise zoning on either side. We did some residential changes to preserve homes on either side of Main Street. We did historic preservation for the first time. We started moving away from industrial zoning. We did them in pieces, right? So we didn't do a plan. We waited until it was like not so dramatic as being impossible to do all at once. Then we did the 07 plan. It was basically from scratch because nothing was usable from the last plan. But we'd done some work along the way, and so that sort of gave us some groundwork. And then, as Jennifer said, the 2017 plan was really an update of the statistics, a few changes, but really a focus on the waterfront, largely because Metro North had come with a proposal for TOD. The community wasn't ready for it, and kind of the comment was, let's get ready for it, right? So one of the questions I think we should address is, as Jennifer kind of suggested, are there target areas that we should be thinking about? Which is why I kind of suggested read the thing. And let's talk about whether there's something substantial or meaty that we are looking to change, because they're pretty high-level goals, right? And as Jennifer said, we do update our zoning with regularity, and so we make it a living document, right? We took changes from the Main Street Committee, we put it into our zoning. We're taking changes from Fishkill Avenue, which we want to incorporate, so things like that. So I just wanted to add that and then ask the council, are there target areas as a discussion topic? We don't have to solve it tonight, but we can launch a process and have that discussion along the way before it starts.
Yeah, I would say that, like, anecdotally, it sounds right to target specific areas rather than say we need like a whole-scale rewrite of the plan. And I think some of those areas have come up in discussion tonight. The concept of a community that you can get around in without having to drive everywhere, I think, is a really good one. So kind of what does that look like in different areas of the city? How do we encourage more non-personal vehicle use, whatever that looks like? I think there's a lot of different things that could be, and that could vary based on, Main Street. Maybe it's something that takes people from the east to the west side, and that's it, so that, you can cover that mile long without having to double back. But maybe in somewhere like Fishkill Avenue, it's more like a microtransit or a bike share or whatever. Anyway, I think that's probably a really hot topic that should be addressed. In terms of like specific zones themselves, I'm not sure that I have a specific zone, but I do have a thought around, and Paloma's brought this up a couple of times, so maybe you can articulate a little bit on this, but like like unit sizing or micro units, like how do we kind of rate size the type of housing we have? I don't know if it's something I've been thinking about. I know you've brought it up and that feels like a good topic, but I don't know if you want to add.
I mean, I think that's tied to to the idea of overall of form-based zoning, which Sergey has brought up a couple of times, I believe. I don't know if it makes sense to sort of put this into the comp plan, if it's a parallel process. But obviously, no one's surprised that my number one concern is affordable housing. And I think that the idea of smaller units is one potential tool in a whole toolbox. But I'd be interested in taking a half step back from that and re-articulating what kind of housing we're looking for and getting more specific about the strategies we need to get there.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. I want to step back to the process. So there will be a committee, right, that will be working and developing proposals based on the draft, based on the feedback from the public. The role of the council at this stage, are we setting the scope and like the direction for that committee? What's the relationship between us and the committee? I'm not very clear on that.
Yeah, I think it's appropriate for you, as you're kind of doing right now, to identify some of your hot topics, things that you feel need to be addressed in the community, and to convey those to the committee. But ultimately, then the committee and the public process is going to drive what comes from, what results from those discussions. So, you are ultimately the approval authority for the comprehensive plan. But like I said, it really is driven by public input and public participation to figure out, where those recommendations are going to go. But I do think that the process that you're going through right now to identify those sort of targeted areas that you would like the committee to focus on and would like to solicit public feedback on is important. That's an important part of the process.
And I think,
thank you.
Sorry, just following. I think that feedback also would go into grant applications. So in writing what this comp plan will be targeting, I think distinguishing the community and what you want to focus on helps with grant applications and making you more competitive. And then also in the RFP that goes out to select consultants. I think certain consultants get attracted to different proposals based on what a community wants to do, and then they kind of highlight how they've done that before. Mm-hmm. And so I think highlighting these target areas in an RFP will help us get better proposals back as a community for consultants who are right for this community.
I think I also wanted to add too, I want to make sure that it's understood that the comp plan is not going to come up with like what the solution is for affordable housing, right? Or the solution for public transportation and making the city more walkable, et cetera. It's going to come up with recommendations to explore this, explore that, explore these different concepts and ideas, and through that you may develop zoning ultimately. Mm-hmm. So what I think is the most beneficial part and the most useful part of a comp plan is that very end of the comp plan where you have your implementation table and your priorities for what you want to try to accomplish over the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. So that it's not always rezone this to that. It's a lot of times more broad for the city council to consider X, Y, and Z.
The thing I would add, just off what Jennifer said, it's sort of up here, right? there's goals and there's some recommendations. And if you read the recommendations, say in transportation, there's already things about pedestrian and bike and, you know, kind of public transit. In the housing stuff, there's also recommendations, but they're still up here. We tend to do zoning kind of down here. Occasionally, we have to go back and adjust the comp plan because we've made a change that's significant enough that we have to alter that. So I'm not sure, we should keep identifying areas. We should let people know areas of our interest, but it may not translate into major changes of the comp plan as much as some of those details. And then in that last section, as Jennifer said, in the implementation plan, there could be some new things in there that, you know, we tend to either take recommendations or we may add ourselves when it comes to us to approve the comp plan.
One more process question. So the grant, you know, we will apply. Hopefully we get it. If we don't, I don't remember we have a line item for comprehensive plan update. So then we use general fund to pay for the consultant. What's the process if we don't get the grant?
It's up to us to decide, right?
That'll all be part of the budget discussions this year. I would anticipate that we'll be discussing that. We probably won't have answers on the grant at that point, but we might be able to, we'll probably have to put something in regardless because it's obviously a major, you know, item that we'll be anticipating for next year.
Got it.
Yeah. Another way I'd like to maybe spend some money on this process is when you talk about public participation, I think one thing that's different from the last time that we did this comprehensive plan is now we have a world that is on Zoom. And it gives us an opportunity to get public comment from people who might not have the ability to be like on a board. We have a ton of residents who spend a significant portion of their life on the train, commuting, and are, you know, not spending a lot of time here. Like I just want to make sure that we are, as we're thinking about who might be involved in the community, from the community, that we're really thinking about what outreach we're doing. We're getting people who were born and raised here, that we're getting people who have recently moved here, that we're getting people that would like to age in place here, we're getting people that would like to, you know, be the next generation here. Just want to make sure that we're really casting a wide net so that we get input from people who might not have had a voice. Because I think one of the things is, by the time we finish this, like this is the time to say, what do you want Beacon to be like? Like by the time the developer has already, you know, put in their plans and ground has been broken, like it's that point is too late. This is the point to say, I want it to look like this. So I'd like to cast a wide net.
Yeah, and I think to that point, I think the committee and the consultant as well, in particular, will help identify a lot of those different opportunities. I think Zoom is an excellent example that, you know, didn't necessarily exist in 2017, or at least not as widespread as we have it now. But I've also seen comprehensive plan committees, you know, have a table at the farmers market, and, you know, make sure that they're offering workshops, you know, maybe some in the morning during a weekday, some in the evening during the weekend, some on the weekend, so to really capture the whole, you know, range of demographic to make sure you're not excluding anybody.
And who's responsible for creating this committee, and who is responsible for shopping the RFP?
You guys.
All of us?
So
Well,
the mayor
mayor
appoints
appoints.
the committee, and that's subject to your confirmation. And then as far as the RFP selection, that's up to you all.
That's normally something the city administrator's office would do. They would issue the RFP.
Publicly?
All of our
Yeah,
RFPs
Ben,
and
do
bids
you
are
wanna-
posted publicly. We have a pretty rigorous process where these get posted. And they're
Yeah.
open for anyone who qualifies for the bid or the RFP to submit for.
Yeah, and I will note this is professional services, so it doesn't have to be bid.
Correct.
But it is an RFP, request
Yes.
for proposals, right?
Request for proposals, but not a competitive bidding, correct.
I think one of the areas of, I think, that I would like to take a look is expanding the scenic views. There are scenic views identified in the 2017 plan that kind of look towards the estuary, Madame Brett Park, and then the Hudson. There is pretty much nothing looking at the mountain of Fishkill Creek. And this keeps coming up in planning board discussions, keeps coming up here, that we're not protecting the views, but we have not codified the views, so there is not really much to protect. in a way. So there is a map in the 2017 with like a dozen of viewpoints identified at that stage. So that's something to adopt. But in terms of transportation and there is a lot of good stuff in 2017. I think the difference can be attaching to that a master plan, because then it becomes a step closer to implementation, and then it becomes not just a statement of policy, but a planning document. And that would allow to look for implementation grants.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement, because when I read it and I reread the plan, the comp plan itself is largely fine. It's like, can you add detail underneath it, right? And I think that's a really fair statement. And that, I think, is something, it doesn't necessarily happen with this. It happens with individual grants to develop that detail underneath this high-level document. So.
And my suggestion is, I want the entire comp plan to be looked at, not sections. It's just 10 years, just completely different now. It needs to be looked at in its entirety and broken down, and really let the community have a chance to put their say-so in on this. We're not just going to do section by section. Now that 10 years is up and we have the opportunity, let's really take the opportunity, get community input, and really look at it in entirety. Not one section here, one this. Oh, that was good from 2017. Beacon is not from 2017 and 2027. It's different needs, and this is what we need to look at. The entire thing, since now we have the opportunity.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's done by the consultants is they update all the data in all the sections, and that allows people, the committee, to review the recommendations and the objectives in all the sections. Doesn't mean necessarily they'll change, but it will certainly look at every single section, right? And that's a natural part of the process. But as you could see in 2017, the main changes, as shown in the executive summary, were in this one area near the waterfront, right?
Is there anything in the statute that prescribes how long this is supposed to take? Like, how many months do we need to discuss this before it needs to be wrapped up, or can we take essentially indefinite time to go through this?
There is no time period provided for in the statute or in your charter.
So, I mean, one point of focus for me, just procedurally, would be like laying out very clearly what we anticipate the timeline of this being. Like, when do we want to start collecting public comments? For how long? When is the consultant going to come into play? When is a report going to be issued? How much comment should we expect after that? And really give the public a sense of, this is your time to participate in this, and at each stage, here is how we anticipate you will participate in this. I think keeping it as structured as possible to give people an idea of what to expect would be useful.
And that's something that you can often write into your RFP to have the consultants do that. Like, one of the first things they come into you is they give you what is their public engagement plan and what is their timeline for this project, and they'll usually present it to the council. But to your point, I think sometimes that information doesn't necessarily make it out fully wide. So from that very first step, even though it's not the comp plan itself, but the timeline for the process and what the procedure is going to be, you can write that gets spelled out very clearly at the beginning of the process, and then we just need to get the word out and share that every way possible.
Yeah, I would just add to that. A few years ago, we did a recreation inventory study with Weston and Sampson. That was pretty early on when I started working here, but I was a part of the evaluating group for that, and all of the groups all the vendors that responded to the RFP for that had a plan in place. So it was kind of part of their pitch about where we expect to do this many engagements of this kind and this many of that kind, and here's why we think that that's an effective way of doing it. And so that would, as we're going through our RFP criteria, that would certainly be an important aspect of it. And certainly I think the key is, once that's established, of course, advertising it widely so that people who want to get engaged can. They know when it is, and there's rigorous ways for them to get involved. I think all of those things will kind of be things that we're thinking about during the evaluation of the RFP, and then after we have selected a vendor, then we'll need to go through the practice of actually making sure that people show up to the input.
It's an awesome level of detail. Let's definitely make sure we make that public.
And ensuring that they have enough time to get here. Like, don't post it Monday and they have to be here by Thursday. I would like for it to go out, them knowing way ahead of time when they need to come and make their public comments to be heard.
Yeah, I mean, one tactic could be you know, I would think we would stand up some information on the website about this, and there would be more than one opportunity for people to comment. You know, we might want to consider a postcard campaign to all the households in Beacon, directing them to the website to get some information about the upcoming, whether it's a charrette or a survey or this or that, so that people know how to source information about participation.
I think that should be part of our communications audit that we do for the city and evaluating all of the different channels we have.
Yeah, I mean, we've done mailers for other topics like the water meters, so I don't think that there's any concern that we wouldn't be able to do something that really is reaching people broadly and potentially just outlines the entire schedule for the different opportunities throughout the, you know, the early parts of the year.
Yeah, one thing I see community to community to community, a common thread with larger projects like this, whether it's, you know, a development project or whether it's something that is, you know, city initiated, is the public needing to understand what the timeline is and what the expectations are. Time and time again, that tends to be, I'm sure you see it as well, it tends to be a point of frustration. So yeah, the more you can communicate, putting a designated, you know, tab on your website for the comprehensive plan process, we've seen that be very effective.
Great.
One more area that I find kind of lagging in the past in the 2017 plan, and I think something that can lead to potentially zoning changing or building code changes, is climate threat analysis and adaptation. I would like to see a more rigorous study done, might be follow-up, might be within that, to better understand our threats. I think our 2026 Dutchess County Hazard Mitigation Plan was pretty close to a joke. And we needed to pass it real fast to not to lose FEMA money, but it was riddled with mistakes. It posed that we have no threat of wildfires in Beacon, which, you know, after Pasadena, you know, you shouldn't say. But proper understanding of what we might face in the next 10 years climate-wise might lead us to change some coding, some codes, work with Fishkill to do in fire breaks. You know, there can be actual adaptation strategies so that we don't have to rely on FEMA and prevent.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's we will want to change sections to update things. Also, like, we might want to talk about how I don't even want to say it out loud, but like how AI could potentially impact, like, just, or like automated vehicles, things like that. Like, we might want to think about some things that are potential threats or opportunities in our future, depending on how we look at them. But you just reminded me, there's sections that we would never have thought of 10 years ago that we want to think about this time.
So, how do we want to proceed? So this was meant to be an introductory discussion, right? Because it was meant to, like, give you all a little bit of background, because I'm not sure anyone's been through a comp plan before.
Natalie has.
Yeah, okay.
I think that is the next
Jennifer
step.
as well.
It does sound like the first thing is being prepared to potentially submit the grant application, which would again be a function of the city administration office. So I think I would just ask Ben if there is input or support needed from city council in getting that grant application ready. I'm not expecting you to have an answer now, just something to think about. In the later half of the year, some things that we might be able to do are open up applications for committee so that we can kind of get that up and ready to roll for people when we're actually starting with the consultant. And then the third thing that, again, I don't think we need to talk about this like tomorrow, but in terms of the consultant services, what would the council identify as the top needs? I know we talked about communication here, but like, what are some other criteria that we might want to have be part of that RFP for the consultant?
Right, in terms of timing, you know, I assume that we will shoot for this grant. I assume, as you suggest, the timing of it would be apply for the grant, see if we get it, and then start up the committee search process, get a group going by end of the year so we get started, something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, depending on the grant application timing, there's maybe some things that we can do in parallel that, like, we know we're going to do regardless of the grant. Like, we're going to form a committee whether we get a grant or not. So, you know, and then again, just thinking about, like, the structure of what kind of services would we need or want to support that committee.
Yep. And then, you know, along the way, we're also going to be doing implementation type issues. For instance, we have some scenic views that are in the Route 52 committee. You know, so those sorts of things. So the more detailed oriented stuff, or a study associated with pedestrians or bicycles, which would form the basis not so much of the comp plan, but as much as that layer of detail that you're mentioning, Sergey, below that.
Mhm.
So we're going to be doing some of that anyway.
A question about Route 52. So adopting the changes, or discussing adopting the changes proposed by the fiscal district committee, do we need put it in a comprehensive plan that we intend to do so, or we can start working on those zoning changes this year and then just kind of like reflect them in the comprehensive plan?
That one's yours, right, Natalie? Or no,
I'll just say, yeah, as long as they are consistent with your comprehensive plan, as long as there's nothing in your comprehensive plan that is directly inconsistent with what you plan to do with Route 52 and those zoning laws, you don't have to wait for the comprehensive plan to be finalized in order to move forward on those.
Because it doesn't mention that area much at all.
Yeah. There's one reference you pointed out.
Yeah, so I'm working on a little decision tree that we'll go through before we start to consider the Fishkill Avenue zoning recommendations. But I think there is one section in the comprehensive plan. It is largely silent on Fishkill Avenue, except for saying improvements to things like sidewalks and different like pedestrian and infrastructure. There is one part in your code or in the comprehensive plan that does say keeping commercial development focused on your main street, and that's one place where it does say like being aware of spreading your main street too far kind of aspect. So I think that'll be there, and I think that'll be at the forefront as we go through those zoning recommendations that we are. And I think those kind of come up in the zoning recommendations because there's a lot of discussion of additional housing with some added commercial uses, but I think we'll have to talk about that when we're talking through the specifics of the zoning. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's a kind of a higher standard that you can't be in direct like conflict with your
right. Like for example, just being silent about an area does not mean that you're inconsistent with your comp plan in implementing zoning laws for that area in which there's silence. But
I think as we start working through it, there might be areas where you do start to identify aspects that you want to be stronger in your comprehensive plan, so that the two are not only not opposed, but are really directly aligned.
Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think it's more the latter of what you just said, like, and obviously you were very involved in this, so I'm sure, like, this was part of the thought process. I really don't remember anything being in direct contradiction to what's in the comp plan. I think it's more of, like, that's probably an opportunity where the comp plan could be a little bit stronger on what should be there. But I didn't see any reason that would prevent us from picking that work up, especially because, as you mentioned, the comprehensive plan is largely silent on Fishkill Avenue, except for that one note.
Yeah. It inventories it, right? Like it does the entire community and aspects. So that's there in terms of what the existing conditions are. But there wasn't really
I think the only way that we get a conflict is, there's a set of industrial recommendations in the one section. If we said, well, let's throw those out, and then if we said, and let's build another Main Street underneath residential, that would get close to violent, a contradiction. But that kind of sets guardrails for us, and that's not what the recommendations are saying. Right? I think it's saying it's a complement, it's a lot of residential, it's maintaining the other uses that are there, and that would be consistent.
I think there was a lot of discussion if you go back to the report, about this not being a second Main Street, right? And allowing this to be maybe different than the kind of like the shopping, small shopping district, and instead this could be area where the committee discussed a lot, like community services that aren't necessarily, or personal services that aren't necessarily provided everywhere, right? Like the laundromat, or these things that like are hard to find elsewhere in Beacon that still kind of exist on Route 52, and like how do you allow for additional development in the much needed housing to develop around that without becoming Main Street, right?
Well, I'm excited for the decision, Trey.
Yeah.
All right.
One more concept I wanted to kind of, the concept that is in the comprehensive plan is a gateway to the community, and it's applied to the waterfront district, and the Route 52, the fiscal committee started talking about that as a gateway. I think that concept is a very good framing for us to think about, and hopefully we can apply it to some other, Washington Avenue, and some improvements of making it feel like you're transitioning into new reality. There was a lot of discussions on safety on Washington Avenue. So just like general exploration of the gateway concept and applying it to every entrance to the city.
All three of them.
4.
Yeah.
Okay. Enough on comp plan for the night? It's a decent introduction if we want to take it up again, but I think you're going to hear the steps coming forward as we kind of described toward end of year. All right? And we will apply for a grant, I can assure you. So, all right. So there's something on disabled veterans. And Nick, are you still around?
I am, yes. I'm
Well,
still
hi
present.
there.
Good evening.
Come on back.
Thank you,
Yep,
Jennifer.
I'm here. You
Thanks,
should be able to
Natalie.
hear me.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
All right, we're
Mayor,
paying
are you
attention,
able-
Nick, sorry.
Yep, okay. You were able to hear me, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
Very good. And thank you to Jennifer for covering it for now. It was all very good conversations. So in your packet is a memo from our office addressing a question raised by Councilmember Gordon at last week's meeting, or 2 weeks ago, inquiring as to the applicability of a property tax exemption for veterans who are being classified as 100% disabled. And so it's a little bit confusing because the state adopted a law in December of 2025 that offered a full property tax exemption for the primary residence of veterans with a 100% service-connected disability. And then applications had to be made, and then the exemption would be granted. There was then additional work by the legislative body with respect to that law, and on February 13th of this year, there was an amendment to that December law that now made it mandatory. Previously, each taxing jurisdiction, the city council, the school district, the county, would have had to take an affirmative action to adopt a local law after a public hearing to offer that exemption. It was not mandatory, it was an option. The state changed that in February. It is now mandatory, and there's no requirement for any taxing jurisdiction to take any action. So the city council does not need to adopt a local law. It is fully in place and available for veterans to apply for who qualify for this exemption as set forth in the law. Our memo goes through how you qualify, and then we have attached the law as well. It is not effective, however, until next year's assessment roll, which applies to the 2027-2028 school tax and the 2028 city and council tax. So there's no action to be taken by the city, but your assessor, Kathy Martin, is aware of it, and this is a nice opportunity to make sure the public is aware of this exemption as well.
Okay, any questions?
Thank you, Nick.
And just so I understand, anybody who qualifies for this exemption does not need to take any action? They will be automatically enrolled, or is this like our other exemptions where they need to apply by March 1st?
They do need to apply for it and demonstrate that they satisfy the criteria. On our memo, there's a hyperlink to the form by, set forth by New York State, and Kathy can also assist them with filling it out.
Okay, great.
Okay. Thank you, Nick. So the next item is 26 budget amendments. Ben, you got that?
Yes, Mayor. So we have two budget amendments we're proposing for this evening. These came from Susan Tucker, our finance director. The first of which is addressing some overages from the snow season that we had this year. Obviously, I think everyone who was here and didn't winter elsewhere is aware that we had a relatively heavy winter. Relatively heavy. Worst since I've lived here, I will say, with some really severe winter storms, and that led to a lot of extra overtime, as well as some damages to the plows that needed to be repaired. So specifically, we've already gone over our snow overtime for the year by about 4,000 from what was budgeted last year. That doesn't leave us, not only does it put us over, it doesn't leave anything for the remainder of the upcoming season, November, December, where we could see some more storms come. So this essentially moves some money there that would give us essentially enough to cover another average snowstorm, and then if we need to bring it back in another amendment, we would do so later in the year. This also, essentially, the repair item will move money to actually allow repairs that need to happen already. So it's covering what needs to happen, and we'll leave a little bit of extra as well in case we need more later in the season as well. So that's item one, and then item two is a pretty straightforward personnel adjustment to account for a retirement, and then a severance retirement line as well. And that one's a little bit smaller in scale and a little bit more straightforward.
Thanks.
Okay. Any questions? All right. Last item for workshop before we go to formal meeting is a discussion of meeting schedule. You all asked for that. And I won't open this up. I don't know. Amber, do you want to start this one?
Sure. So as we're all aware, we had a discussion when we were setting our kind of procedural and administrative updates, and we modified our meeting schedule. From that discussion, there were a couple of primary goals. First, we have been really an outlier in the every week meeting category. It's not necessarily common practice for town boards. I think that is probably for the following reasons. One of the reasons we adjusted the meeting schedule was to allow a better cadence of meeting follow-ups. So instead of having all of our resources be on this constant high-speed treadmill of meeting, manage all the follow-ups, get all the follow-ups done, refer things to other boards, and then get ready for another meeting within 2 to 3 days, this schedule has allowed greater breathing room in between the meetings for those kinds of follow-ups, and again, allowing that kind of more substantial updating to happen as opposed to smaller incremental updates. The other thing that there has been kind of consistent feedback throughout the years about the city's meeting schedule conflicting with other meetings and community events, very, very specifically the school board, which I believe meets the 2nd and 4th. I do not have children, but I believe that's their schedule. That was a consistent point of feedback that people would provide, that it was very difficult to, publicly participate in different things. And so that was some feedback taken into account for that too. So those are the reasons that I recall that we kind of focused on when we made this change. It was brought up as wanting to discuss it again. The other thing that I'll add is that the city council had been operating on this kind of schedule as a little bit of a pilot or a beta test for probably 3 or 4 years over the summer. So this is not necessarily an unusual way of operating for us. It was something that we did for 25 to 30% of the year for several terms consistently. So people wanted to discuss, so discuss.
Yeah. The only thing I would add is, just look at this meeting. We had 2 hours basically after public comment in a workshop, and we're about ready to shift to a regular meeting. It'll be a little bit more than 2 hours, I think, when we're done in workshop. But look at the council meeting. Council meeting is going to take us 20 minutes. It is what it is, and I just don't see there being a problem right now. And again, in my view, we always have the opportunity, if we have a meaty one, is to schedule a lengthy conversation in one of the spare weeks, which is why we generated them. So that'd be my only comment.
I think the biggest thing for me is just the quality of the meeting materials that we now have, where, I don't know, I've been doing this for 7 years at this point. I have seen a marked difference in the materials that we get for discussion, the availability of those materials prior to like 5 o'clock on Monday. When we're meeting at 7, the input that we're getting from the planning board. So I think that kind of getting the city resources off of this high-speed treadmill, in my opinion, has worked very well. I see a market improvement there.
I think if I can kick this off from what you're saying, like, what you were saying about the benefits are definitely that having the Mondays open for other civic engagement, and the fact that we are getting what we need to get done. From the standpoint of what we have in our workshops and our voting meetings, I think that part's been okay. What I think we have lacked is an opportunity for public engagement. I mean, all of us have made ourselves very available to the community in various ways, and I think individually, we've done that well, but as a council, we could probably do a little bit more. And I think this is an opportunity for us to maybe get a little bit creative, especially on the months, June, I'm looking at right now, June, August, and I think November, where we have 3 Mondays, where we have an opportunity to maybe do something outside of this very formal agenda process, workshop and voting, where maybe we still haven't gotten back to our discussion on our priorities. We could maybe spend some time doing that. I mean, one of my favorite things in watching city council meetings are when the high schoolers come to present their ideas, and like, what if we let adults do that too? There's lots of creative ideas where people maybe could come and workshop some of those. We could definitely talk about a comprehensive plan. We could have perhaps a town hall. We could hear from our committee chairs, maybe get some summary reports of what they're doing, or maybe even, I remember back in the day, years ago when I first lived here, there used to be a regular segment of the county legislators would come and be part of the city council meetings. So just like some other things that we might want to think about, that not necessarily saying that we need to meet every Monday for a lot of the reasons that you said, but we could think about what to do with our other Mondays.
Go ahead, Sergey. I see you trying to speak.
So, for me, if we finish 9:30, that works fine. Like last week, 2 weeks ago, it was 10:20. So I think at that point, if we do start going into discussions that long, decision-making potentially can go down. I personally get up at 5 in the morning, sometimes 4:30. So, this is definitely, for me personally, can be challenging to stay up until, 11 here. We have not done it yet, but I also afraid that if we do go into these longer meetings that go way past 9, we'll lose public participation. It's very hard to stay tuned, family, kids, other obligations. So if it's, by 9 or so, I think it works. If it's past 9, I think, you can probably check Zoom data. I'm talking to Ben. We're probably going to see a divot around 9 when people log out from Zoom, my assumption. And I do feel that I very often have to self-censor or to stop myself from following up on certain topics. For example, the 2026 Dutchess County Hazard Mitigation Plan. Like if we had a full, it was another fairly long meeting, and granted I was far away and it was hard to follow up anyway, but if it was a dedicated workshop, I would definitely have followed up with more questions, corrections of factual errors in the report, requested a follow-up from relevant departments, discussed the need to develop the climate risk assessment and adaptation plan as prompted by city administrator Chris White. There were, in that particular report, there were items were missing, but there were items that were identified, like flood risk to the sewage plant and groundwater infiltration, and there was no follow-up, and it was just like we very quickly voted and forgot, and there was no time to bring it back. We can, again, schedule it for and have a dedicated time to talk about climate adaptation, but if we had more workshop space, that could have happened when this topic was on the discussion board.
So if I may, just on the two things you identified, in terms of we do have somewhat inconsistent, some meetings go till 8:45, some go till 10. That, I will say, even when we were meeting, and I think Amber and Paloma can probably speak to this, and all of you have been engaged in
It
other
is what it
forums.
is. Sometimes they're
ebbs and
long,
flows,
sometimes they're short.
you know,
Sometimes the meeting is a lot of administrative things that don't require a lot of discussion because we have to keep the city's operations moving along, and sometimes we are here until 11. It wouldn't matter if we had workshop and the meeting alternating in those cases.
That being said, like, we try and, to the extent we're able to, when the mayor and I and others, including your feedback about what's important to you and what you want on a given time frame, we try and put things together in a reasonable, grouping that is actionable, and it's not going to be overwhelming, or some week is going to have nothing. We try and structure it that way, but there is some unpredictability to that. And, some weeks we'll have might look like a light agenda in terms of voting, but, the workshop items are very meaty, or we get a lot of public engagement, and that takes up an hour. What I would say about the items, I know you raised the specific, the county study as a concern. I understand there was kind of an interest, like a unique element to that, where Chris said that they needed it for some reason on a very short time frame. Generally speaking, for everything else, though, if you see, I would encourage the council, if you see things on the agenda as a workshop item that you feel might require more time, and you want to flag that to me, our practice has been to try and get agendas out earlier than they had been in the past to all of you. And I understand that you don't have time to review them necessarily until Sunday or over the weekend, but if you see an item that you're like, hey, I don't know that we feel like we want to take action on this same evening, I would encourage you to let me know. And to the extent we have the ability to, we could always have a workshop item that we don't vote on until the meeting, unless there's a really pressing reason why that wouldn't work. So maybe that addresses your concern. I don't know if it does. I'm just throwing an idea out.
For me, I can go either way. We can meet twice a month. We can meet 4 times a month. What is most important to me is that the work is getting done. We are sitting here, we are taking the time, and as you stated, and I'm pretty sure, or we should all know this, that even when there was 4 meetings, they were going till 11 o'clock sometimes. So having work the next day, I'm sorry, I apologize that some people have to get up super early to be at work, but this is also something that you wanted to be voted in for. So you're supposed to be here to represent our constituents, whether it's 2 days or 4 days. I want to ensure that we are having timely, real discussions on each and every single topic, and also that the topics that we are bringing up in report and that are being mentioned by our constituents are being put on the agenda and not overlooked. So those are things I want us to really start paying attention to.
Cool. The only thing I'd add is, Amber mentioned this, nobody meets 4 times a month. The typical pattern is 2. Kingston meets once a month. Right? They have committee meetings in between, but that's kind of the norm. And as Amber said, we were able to do this in the summer without a problem. So I like the idea of, as needed, schedule an extra workshop or an extra topic in one of the free weeks. I'm happy to do that. I just haven't seen it as being a necessity just yet. It certainly might be, but I haven't seen it yet.
Well, so as a first principle thinking about this, there's 2 components to these meetings. One of them is actual governance, in which case we've talked about kind of the upsides and downsides of this in terms of the timing and the preparation, and I agree with all that. The other aspect of this, though, is this is a forum for the public, and if the public expresses the desire to have weekly meetings, I think it would serve the public to do that regardless of what the exact reasons of the public are for requesting that. I think we should honor that wish and then work the constraints around that. To Ben's point, we have some flexibility. I just think this is something where we can work around those constraints, but if the public would prefer us to have weekly meetings, I would be in favor of it.
I guess to that point, though, I would say that, again, having knocked on doors for almost 10 years, year after year after year, I've probably heard from 100 people who've said, why do you have to have a meeting on the same night as the school board? So I don't know, we have to decide our meeting schedule and manage to the best of our ability.
And I mean, if we're not going to get the agenda going weekly now, if we're not getting it the week before, giving me the weekend to go over it, and now it's going to be rushed on a Monday where I have to sit there and try to work and then look at that, I'm not making an informed decision either. So if this process now going every 2 weeks, we're getting the packet ahead of time, giving us a weekend to look through it, we're not getting it last minute on a Monday at 5 p.m. as Amber was stating this is how it was previously done, when there were 4 meetings a month, then that is something to consider as well. We're getting more information now. I prefer to have more information and make an informed decision than not.
Yeah. And
Just to say we had 4 meetings. As they're stating, and I keep hearing the same thing, Ben, Paloma, Amber, who have been here and have been doing this, and I'm, like I stated, we have all watched council meetings, I assume, and know that even when there were 4 meetings a month, sometimes they went to 11 o'clock. It is you being willing to have the detailed, hard conversations and not wanting to rush out the door. Can we do that?
Yeah. And just to clarify, I mean, the agenda would get published on Friday, but there would be materials that we wouldn't get. So you would have the agenda outline, and it was just more frequent that we would be like, oh, we're going to get that Monday, or we don't have it yet, and we'll get it to you as soon as possible. So it wasn't that the agenda wasn't available. I just want to clarify that.
What is the constraint, if you don't mind me asking? Like, why would that be published late? Is it just a matter of workload? Is it a matter, like, what is the function?
It's that
of
when
doing
we
that?
do the 4 meetings a month, we put the entire city on this treadmill of having to, like, meeting Monday, respond to all the follow-ups from the meeting, and Ben can articulate more what happens behind the scenes, but then you guys meet with the lawyers and the planning board and everybody else about the follow-ups from Monday, try to address those follow-ups, and then by Wednesday, you're trying to get the agenda ready for the meeting that's in 3 business days.
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially it. I mean, it becomes a bit of an administrative hamster wheel, for lack of a better word. You know, we have the meetings on Monday. Most of Monday, we're getting ready for the meeting in one form or another. And then by Tuesday, Wednesday, we would need to have, if we say we have a substantive item on the following workshop after a meeting, for instance, the comprehensive plan, you know, we're trying to fit in meetings with the planner and the attorneys and get their materials together in 24 to 48 hours. Both of them have other clients, for instance, which might be why in the past Amber's described materials might come Friday, Monday, you know, rather than now. Lee can attest to this. When we meet with the attorneys every week, and Nick as well, we're outlining what's coming up on our next meeting. What do we need to start doing now to plan for that? What do they need to start doing to fit into their schedule with their other clients? And it makes it a little bit easier to have everything together in a timely fashion. I also think it allows your business that you all want done in terms of like the city administration to be taking on. It frees up some bandwidth on my end to focus on maybe things that you're not voting on, but priorities that you've identified, and it allows us to progress things. I would say that it frees up time for the administration by meeting less frequently, just because it allows, you know, weekly meetings require us to develop weekly agendas and have a portion of our time meeting with the consultants and the department heads that could otherwise be working on other items to what's on the agenda next time.
Is there any chance to get some agenda items sooner, or just because some of the getting it on a Friday and then having, or even a Thursday, like, because I work a full-time job and then do this, so I'm doing this on the weekends. Some things take longer to sit with and kind of formulate ideas about, or especially like when we have something that's like that's legal, that might have words that I need to Google. And I am curious if there is any, and this is like if sticking with the every other week, is there a possibility that some of these things are ready earlier that we could get so that we have time to read and process them?
So I think, and that's a great question, and I think my answer would be 2 things. One thing, when we had gone to the schedule in early January, we had identified as a goal that we would have things to you by Wednesday. Now, with the transition to the administrator position, that has reduced the resources a little bit, but that's still the goal. So I would say, generally speaking, that would be ideally I would get you agenda materials by Wednesday, and that means everything that's possible at that point. Obviously, sometimes there'll be a couple things that fall back to later in the week, but when you ask for things earlier, what sort of time frame are you looking for?
I mean, I guess if you have something that's ready, like especially if it's something that, you know, for whatever reason, you've decided it like on a Wednesday, even if it's not, like you're putting an agenda together, is it ever possible to get pieces of the agenda before getting the full agenda?
One example that came to mind to that point was under the comprehensive plan review process, we had a 18-page document, which isn't that long, but from the New York State Department of State regarding zoning and the comprehensive plan, which I'm not at all surprised you added that. It was fascinating, but it took me a lot of time Googling different case law, and I went down quite a few rabbit holes. But if I had
fascinating
that,
endnotes on that one.
yeah,
It was good.
It was really good.
Yeah.
But if I had gotten that, a week earlier, since that was a previously published article, I could have read it a little more.
That's a perfect example. Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, the section on comp plan, both the plan and that could have been distributed early. If the council's interested, I mean, we can try that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then, okay.
No concerns. I mean, I would say that it's probably highly dependent on the given agenda item, but to the extent that there's dense material coming up on like topics, I'm happy to circulate that early. And I know Nick often is the one who's coming up with a lot of these helpful resources, so maybe I'll just pick Nick's brain a little bit. Anything you want to add, Nick?
Yeah, no, I would think these are excellent comments. I'll keep those in mind. I have to say I'm thrilled that everyone's reading these materials in depth also.
I mean, and then obviously to whatever extent those things can be put onto the website so the public can view them. I don't know, Nick, if there's any reason why we can't post a draft version of the agenda to be able to get those materials in front of the public earlier. Obviously, our 2017 comprehensive plan lives on the website and anyone can access that at any time. But it is, several hundred pages long.
The only concern I've come across, and it doesn't happen much, but it does, is that a resident, and again, this has been in other communities, where they'll say they looked at the agenda and then didn't go back and see that it was refreshed, and it also requires they continue to go back and refresh it. So a single publication is probably the best way to handle it.
Or just write draft all over it.
I don't know if that's just creating double work for you, though, Ben, to post it twice.
I mean, it's not necessarily creating double work. We would want to come up with a way to approach it that it's clear. I mean, we're already doing drafts of it, and Nick can attest to this, that we're circulating drafts back and forth throughout the week leading up to a meeting, typically. We could publish things ahead of time. There's always the risk that something gets removed or a hearing that was going to be on needs to be delayed for some reason, and there could be people who, are confused by that. I mean, perhaps labeling it as draft and then is enough of a warning, but it's something we could explore. My question would be, what sort of time frame would you want that to be up? Or is the idea just as soon as possible we should be getting drafts up?
I would say that same Wednesday deadline, and it would only be if materials are going to be after Wednesday.
Okay, so the idea is that on a Wednesday, we'll have a draft up in some form, and then if there's more to come, then we'll just update it as we go.
That being said, if something comes in if it can't be here till a Friday, and occasionally there's been one that wasn't available till Monday, like, that's what lunch breaks are for. Like, we can make that, we can work that in.
I think we also, as a council, need to take advantage of when we feel ourselves diminishing or the conversation lagging, or we are not prepared to make a decision, that we can in fact defer it.
Yes.
And that's a point that we made when we had this discussion on January 3rd. But I just want to reiterate that I don't think that that's come up yet, that we have.
Yeah, I think that's maybe something I would have said with like the historic district overlay conversation if I had felt a little bit more confident. Like when we first brought it up, I would have been like, I'm not ready for this, but we got there.
Yeah, and I think too, January for 4 of you you're all brand new, and would be natural to say I don't know enough yet, and we've put into the agenda sometimes in some materials to get the new crew up to speed, and that allows us now to start to accelerate our process. But there may be some ones where we do say, as Paloma said, that nope, not ready yet, we need some more information, get these 3 things, we'll put it up again.
And just my final thought, I have two final thoughts. One is I just 100% agree with what Lestara said, that the most important thing to me is that the work is getting done. And if that happens over 4 meetings or over 2 meetings, as long as we are fulfilling our duties as council people and deliberating appropriately, I'm agnostic about which way we go. My one other tiny proposed edit is I'm wondering if it would make sense to put our reports before the workshop so that when we're doing public announcements like, hey, for anyone still listening, there's an important event happening in 2 days, very few people are going to hear that. And I'm wondering, I guess, Nick, if there's any reason why we couldn't reorder.
No, it's your agenda format, so you could reorder that if you felt that were appropriate.
And, quite logically, the reports aren't relevant to what follows it.
Not
right?
necessarily. Or, we are all talking, so if we have a new thought,
Yeah.
we can bring it up then.
Yeah.
As long as, I think, maybe if there's a chance for us to, at the end of the meeting, sometimes in the report, I've thought of something because of a public comment or a part of our conversation or just that I remembered that I didn't think of. If there's a chance for us to just add an addendum to a report at the end in case something else like that comes up, I think that would be a good move.
Yeah, I think, just to be clear, the report should happen after public comment, because I think the other thing that happens is people make a public comment and then 2 hours later we respond, which I think is confusing to folks.
I think that's a good idea, Paloma.
I do as well.
Yeah.
I'll implement that going forward.
Okay.
Great.
Okay.
All right. Are we okay to move on to reports?
No, I would love to just keep talking. It's good.
Well, the report is your opportunity to do that. Do you want to go first? Let's yap.
I take it as a challenge. I'm a morning person, but I want to see if I can stay up late.
Go for it. Give me the longest report you got.
Just,
You're on.
oh my gosh, what? No, I'm not ready. Thank you. Hi, happy to report. Actually, don't have that much. Just, I had office hours this past Sunday with Dutchess County Chair Yvette Valdez-Smith. They went really well. Thank you for everybody who came out to the library. We'll be scheduling them again sometime in June, most likely. I want to thank the fire department for their heroic work with the rescue at the pool. And thank everybody who kept their cool. That was a pretty awful situation. As a dedicated swimmer, I'm really sad that we don't have access to the pool for the foreseeable future, but it was really, really grateful that they thought to come in and save the day. Moving forward, I just want to let everyone know that this Wednesday is Bike to School Day. So just be on the lookout for bikes on the road. They'll be mostly sticking to the side streets, but keep an eye out, and anybody who's able to participate, it's a great day. And on Sunday, May 17th, the Animal Rescue Foundation will be doing the 5K, and I'm walking in it. So hope to see you all there.
All right. I really enjoyed I Am Beacon 10-year celebration event. It was very festive, and I'm very happy that they are doing great work and are supported by our community. And another great tradition, Strawberry Festival is coming up on June 14th. They do need volunteers sooner than that to start helping with purchasing and then eventually baking, sales, slushes, setup. More information at beaconsloop.org. Holland Center 2026 Gala is Thursday, May 14 at the Roundhouse. And Dutchess County is hosting Household Hazardous Waste and Electronics event on June 6 at 626 Dutchess Turnpike, Poughkeepsie, New York. Registration opens on the 6th of May on Wednesday at 9 a.m. There is 400 slots, and you can bring all sort of hazardous waste, strippers, thinners, gasoline, brake fluids, antifreeze, photochemicals, stereos, computers, Solvents, there is no limit how much you can bring. Don't bring latex paint or oil-based paint. Those can be brought to any store that sells paint. Perhaps we can post it on the city website.
Yep, I was just about to say that I'll get that up tomorrow.
I send you a link.
Oh, perfect.
All right. Now I do want to circle back to the comment from the Trail Committee and comment about Trail Committee and the Greenway Trail Committee. I fully recognize the power of the mayor under our code to appoint and therefore dismantle ad hoc committees. And second, I have been a strong proponent of comprehensive trail planning in Beacon specifically, as well as regionally, between us and neighboring communities. And I have worked on some trail visioning work as a chair of CAC with the Greenway Trail Committee and during our open space inventory project. That said, I was surprised with how the creation of the new committee and dismantling of the Greenway Trail Committee has been handled. The committee has existed for many years and has become an important part of our community. Committee termination came without any warning or discussion with the chair and members, just an email, polite one I should say, thanking them for the service and terminating the committee. Volunteers were hurt, and I think we could do better. I'd like to propose we invite Greenway Trail Committee to do a final presentation about their work through the years, the achievements and plans that we're working on. This will show a token of support, inform the community and new council members about what they have been doing, and also serve as some sort of a closure for the great dedication the volunteers showed to our city.
Thanks, Sergey. I'll second that feedback. I think inviting the Greenway Trail Committee to share that final report that Thomas alluded to council and to the public would be appropriate, and also I think a really helpful document to pass along to the Trails Committee. And they have done an incredible amount of work over the years. And in general, I know we bring this up every once in a while, but I think it would be great to hear from all of our committees once a year, and just so that we as council as well as the public are aware of the work that all of the committees are doing on an ongoing basis. I think I'd be particularly interested in hearing from the Traffic Safety Committee, particularly thinking about this conversation that we're having around a master plan for pedestrian safety. I was compelled by the public comment that we had earlier urging us to be sure that we're providing adequate planning support to the Traffic and Safety Committee, so that they're not doing sort of reactive addressing of issues. And Carolyn, you can verify if that's correct.
Yeah, also, formally they're the Parking and Traffic Safety Committee, so it's even more appropriate.
Very good. For the other folks who had some public comments around access and where all of these plans are going, I hope our conversation of the comprehensive plan was helpful in understanding the ways that we are going to be very shortly proactively engaging the community and incorporating all of the various studies and works of the committee that of our various committees that have happened in the last 10 years. I was also at the I Am Beacon Show Up event, which was a great moment to connect with others who are directly serving our community. And then my last announcement is that on Saturday, May 16th, the Howland Library is hosting an event providing care for caregivers. This event is recognizing that conditions like secondary trauma and working in high-stress situations come with their own burdens, and those who are on the front lines of giving care to our community members in need are also particularly in need of support themselves. So this is for first responders. I would consider librarians in that category, or psychologists, psychiatrists, anybody who is providing direct care to our community and may need some support themselves. Again, that's on Saturday, May 16th at the library starting at 1 p.m.
All right. +1 for having the Greenway Committee kind of recap where we are with trails and do a handoff on that to the extent that they wish. I would also like to, on the committee theme, thank our tree committee and the recreation department and Ben for another just smashing Arbor Day. There is a beautiful new white swamp oak outside of Yanarella, so if you see it, say hi to it, wish it well. We had a pretty good crowd. The weather was nice, so it was, fulfilled all of my hopes and dreams for Arbor Day. And in terms of voting, I want to thank everybody who voted in the Howland Libraries election this past week. And that's an important way to use your voice. And again, on that theme, I did want to mention that we have an I Voted sticker contest for Dutchess County, which is very exciting. Participants should be between the ages of 9 and 18. So I'm going to lobby for a grown-up contest at some point, but the kids get this one. And your submissions are due May 29th. You can find information on elections.dutchess.ny.gov. Really fun opportunity for some of our Dutchess County under 18s to be creative and get their amazing I Voted image printed out for everybody when they go vote. So take advantage of that. Zach, all yours.
Being at the end of the table, most of my items were mentioned already, so I will +1 to the R5K, which I will also be participating in. And I was also at the I Am Beacon event, which is very nice. The last thing I'll say is I did have office hours this past weekend. Pretty good participation. I had a 2-hour conversation with some housing advocates about housing in Beacon. The moral of the story is that if you would like time with us and you would like to have an extended conversation about any topic you care about, that is a very high leverage opportunity to do so. It's a good time to have an extended conversation if you feel you aren't being heard or if there is an issue you would really like to get one of our ears about at some point. That's all I got.
Okay, +1 on the Greenway Trail Committee coming in and finalizing that. I did get a lot of feedback via email of a lot of constituents that were not happy at how it was just dismantled without any word ahead of time. So I agree with having that being done and seeing that final report. The I Am Beacon Community Mixer on the 30th was amazing. Many of us did attend, seen many of you there. Also, I see that my question at previous meeting regarding the tax exemption for disabled veterans was answered, so thank you for that. Next question from last meeting is where we stand with the funds that were supposed to be appropriated for the bike master plan. This was previously agreed on for the council, so I would really like those funds to get going and for that bike master plan to get made. Also, finally, the free breakfast program that is held at Beacon Backyard because of the construction being done on Fishkill Avenue. You can enter through the gate on East Main Street. It will be open. Ben, did you get follow-up for our walkers from across the street?
I did. So they're going to let them across to the extent they can at the actual crossing at Hannah while it's safe. But if at that moment that they arrive, it's not, they're going to just route them over to the crossing at Ron's. So
Awesome.
they're maybe a little bit out of the way, but not much.
Okay, great. So those who are coming by vehicle, you can enter through the gate on East Main. It will be open. Our walkers can still get through same side right on Hannah Lane. And as always, my time is your time. My office hours are whenever you're available. So call me, text, email, and we will set something up.
Okay, just a couple things we can get on to formal business. In the last couple weeks, I ended up going to Albany at the request of the governor's office. We had 5 mayors, 2 from Western New York, 3 from the Hudson Valley, work with the governor's office to lobby the legislature on the governor's budget. We had an opportunity to meet the chief of operations, which is basically the #1 under the governor, and also the governor for a few minutes. So well worth doing. You should not be surprised if I was talking to both of them about rail trail. Second, I had the opportunity last Thursday, and I was booked, could not go to the I Am Beacon event, to serve on a panel that Yale put on in the Hudson Valley up in Rhinebeck on the Living Village, which is a development being done by the Yale Divinity School that actually is positive on power, water, and other parts of our sustainable footprint of a building. I had the opportunity to serve on that panel with head of Scenic Hudson, and it was a good event. And then finally, just on trail, I just want to read a part of an email, a follow-up email I sent last week. So in addition to multiple thank yous for everyone's service, which, as you know, I do with regularity, I also wrote, in case I was not clear, I encourage anyone interested to apply for the new Broader Perspective Trails Committee. So I don't envision there to be substantial change in membership as much as there is a broader perspective. I could not tell from the city records who was on or active on the Greenway Committee, since members have come and gone without applications to the city or appointments by me. So we had very few in the way of records as to who was on and who was not. However, I do expect to see many of the same faces. I do want the committee to be more formal in its conduct, more proactive in communication and collaboration with the city and with me as mayor, and working together on trails. And I acknowledge that the one clear change in this committee is the chair, which is my choice as mayor. I felt that Graham Lawler has a strong personal interest, many years on the Greenway Committee, and a strong interest in the rail trail, which is the city's and my #1 priority, and that with that chair we will have a more collaborative and communicative relationship. And I'm happy to discuss. I actually like the idea of having someone from Trails Committee come and give a summarization of where we are to date and where we think we're heading. So happy to do that. That's all I got. Ben, anything?
A couple of things. I would just piggyback off of what Lestar said. We obviously have a big paving project going on right now on Fishkill Avenue, kind of the final stretch of that generational project. So we appreciate people bearing with us while it's happening. I'm happy to report that they made great progress today. They actually finished a whole lane from the edge of the city line to Blackburn, which is faster than expected. Weather permitting, we hope to continue the fast progress on that to minimize the disruption to people's daily lives and for the people who commute through there, live through on that stretch and work in that area. Just a thanks to the Highway Department, our Highway Superintendent Michael Manzi and Clove Excavators for excellent work today. I went out and walked around a little bit, talked with Mickey, and got a sense of how things are going. It seems like it's going very smoothly. The other things that I wanted to announce are that we're formally doing the ribbon cutting on May 8th for our Highway Garage Solar Project. The project itself has been done for a little time, but due to logistical reasons, we're doing the ribbon cutting now. It's very exciting. We're very grateful for grant funding we've received from Jacobson's office, Assemblymember Jacobson's office, as well as NYSERDA. And I also want to just make sure I keep harping on May 11th. We're having a Know Your Rights seminar here in this space, 5:30 p.m. It'll be video available online. There will be a Q&A component, and that's with the Hudson Valley Justice Center. They'll be doing kind of a high-level primer on all things landlord-tenant rights. People can come with their questions if they have specifics, and they've also offered to do more specific future sessions. If they see a need that there's kind of a zoomed-in version, they'd be willing to do that in the future.
Great.
Lastly, I just wanted to mention that the ARF event, not only is it a very exciting annual event, it's also their 40th anniversary. So it's a milestone year for them. And that's all for me.
Okay. We have a resolution that's budget amendments. It's a combined resolution, so this is, I'm looking for a motion and a second for two budget amendments, one of $50,000, split $20,000 for overtime for snow, and then $30,000 for repairs, and then a second item of $3,577 for two different retirements.
Motion.
Second.
All right, so I hear Amber and Zach. Any discussion on this that we didn't pick up earlier in workshop? Hearing none, all in favor of those two budget amendments, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, thank you. Then I need a motion and a second to approve the minutes of April 20th.
Motion.
Second.
All right, so that was Carolyn and
Amber.
Amber, okay. And anyone come up with anything to notice in the minutes for changes or alterations?
One clarification, Ben is currently our acting city administrator.
think the proper technical term is still going to be deputy. There's a formal process that
Correct.
council would have to do an actual vote to name acting, I think, in developing the deputy position. And Nick can correct me if I'm wrong. The guidance we received from the legal team was it was already envisioned that the deputy would essentially act in that space if there was a vacancy in the role. So we didn't feel that it was necessary to do that process for the acting title. And the idea was I would just serve as deputy technically until June 19th, which is when the retirement is effective, at which point I would take the city administrator role. Is that correct, Nick?
That is correct, and we should probably in the near future think about just clarifying that in the language in the charter. That may be best to wait till after we appoint a deputy administrator, just in case there are any other changes we wish to do. But you are correct, Ben, that you are acting as deputy administrator, not acting city administrator.
Okay. My only other item is that page 2 and 3 are double numbered.
I'll get that fixed before we post them.
Great.
Okay, Molly.
Thank goodness. I appreciate someone doing that. All right, all in favor of approving the minutes of April 20th with the changes mentioned, say aye.
Aye.
All right, anyone opposed? None. All right, this is the second opportunity for public comment. For anyone who hasn't made a comment at first, one's all you get. One's all you get. One's all you get. Sorry, I can't do that one. All right, because then I have to open the doors. Anyone online, Ben? But we'll be here in 2 minutes. You can get us all.
Okay.
We good online?
Oh, sorry. No hands raised on Zoom.
All right, so our next meeting will be in 2 weeks on Monday, May 18th, here at 7 p.m., and I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
So it's Zach and Amber, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all. Good night. You got us.
Good night,
What
everyone.
would you like to say?
Good night, Nick.
Bring it.